Well, good evening everyone and welcome to this council meeting of the 1st of March. Do we have any apologies?
Chairman, apologies from Councillor Gordon Lundy, representing Powell, Jeremy Bartlett, Harold Bairstow, James Pennyworth, Richard Conley and Neil Royce Longstreet.
Thank you. Now I'm going to keep my remarks extremely brief tonight as we have a long agenda, but first of all I must sadly reflect on the passing of Anthony Durrant, who was the MP for Reading West for many years, who passed away last week. So could I ask Councillor Lindsay, please?
Thank you, He served the people of Reading West very well, and he got a lot of tribute in the Reading Borough meeting, which I heard second hand from both, obviously, the Conservative side and the Labour side as well, as the Deputy Leader of Labour, and that was very nice remarks about it. And he was very conscientious of the constituency MP. And I know that I was involved within the Reading West Conservative Association from 1983 onwards, and I knew him extremely well. He was a whip in the government, which entailed that he was the official hostage. So when Her Majesty the Queen went to open Parliament, he went to Buckingham Palace just in case anything badly went towards Her Majesty the Queen, so he could be swiftly dispatched. So they did treat him well, and they used to give him refreshments and all the rest of it. So he was treated well as a hostage, I'm glad to let you know. Personally, I got to know him for several years. Became quite firm before he died. And on one occasion, I was going out canvassing with him in fields or places, and he told me to be careful because there was a bit of traffic on the road. So he looked after my interests on that very well. But it is a very sad day. Councillor Jeanette Skeet has the arrangements when they will eventually have for the funeral, and I haven't got any further details about that, Chairman. But I do remember him on the section.
Councillor Baird.
Thank you, Chairman. We was at the town hall in 1984, and Anthony Durrant was then MP. I joined as we would the town hall branch of the Conservative Association. And Tony and Audrey were great supporters. He was a very, very kind, generous man. He gave his time. He listened to every issue that was raised with him. The last time that we saw him was at the funeral a couple of years ago of a long-standing member. He wasn't well, but he made the effort to attend that funeral. He spoke to all of us afterwards. He was sadly missed when he was no longer able to be active. And as I say, very good memories of Tony and Audrey, and we're all going to miss him out there.
Councillor Locke.
Thank you, Jonathan. I knew Anthony Durrant from a different way, and I regarded him as a gentleman. My husband, Keith Locke, stood against him twice for the parliamentary, and in all dealings with him, he was courteous, he was fair, and I had good memories of him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Molly said everything I was going to say in actual fact. I think we could sum up frankly in one word. He was a gentleman.
Right. Could I ask everyone to remembrance of Sir Anthony Durham, please, to stand for a minute's silence? Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, since our last meeting, the Vice Chairman and I have had some 27 events between us that we have attended on your behalf. Many, of course, being the Christmas events, the events leading up to Christmas with the many carol services, and the events I like really to go to at the schools, where we appreciate the awards given to our young people for the excellent work they are doing at school. And I was able to attend St. Bart's and Liberty in Tilehurst to see them receive their awards. And a final reminder of my golf day, which will be on the 28th of April for anyone yet who hasn't entered, for my charity, Helen and Douglas Hatton. Now, I would like to remind all members, before we proceed, you have a full copy of the amendments and corrections in front of you. I would like to read swiftly on the minutes. We have two lots of minutes. The meeting held on the 10th of December, and I need to before I propose corrections to those minutes, that we had Councillor Pamela Bale 1 present at that meeting, which is not reflected in the minutes. Is that fine to second, please?
Yes, Chairman, I plead to second it with the correction.
Thank you very much. Can I now propose those four amendments? Thank you very much.
Yes, Chairman, I plead to second. Yes, Chairman, I plead to
Right, and then on to the minutes of the 21st of January, which I would like to propose. Is that fine to second, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, please to second.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, Chairman, I plead to second.
Can I have a show of hands for those? Right, and then on to the minutes of the 21st of January. Declaration to the second.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, yes, Mr. Chairman, please to second. Yes, Chairman. Yes, Chairman.
Have a show of hands for
Those members with the exception of Councillor Nicholas completed an application to grant his concession. That relates to Councillor Nicholas completed an
Petition which has 2,454 signatures to present. It's a petition to retain short breaks funding for the Oasis Youth Club and befriending scheme for young people with autism in West Berkshire. And with your permission, Chair, overview from Kate Lowe, Chair of the National Autistic Society West Berkshire branch, and a parent with autism to read. And I have minimised. I've reduced the amount that I'm going to say, but I know that won't minimise its validity or its impact. So, as part of the proposed 2016 budget, there will be a dramatic decrease in the short breaks provision for respite for children with disabilities. 2 autism-specific schemes will be affected by these cuts. The befriending service, which provides one-to-one support for young people with autism, and the Oasis Youth Club. Both schemes are run by the National Autistic Society for local people in West Berkshire. Children and teenagers with autism are some of the most socially isolated and vulnerable young people in our community, and these specialist short breaks are a lifeline for them and their families. It's a false economy to cut these services. They're extremely low cost, considering their hugely positive outcomes. I urge you to reconsider the cuts to these services for our children and teenagers with autism, who are some of the most vulnerable young people in West Berkshire. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. And that will be considered as part of the revenue budget debate this evening. Councillor Locke, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been asked to present this petition from the Burfield Children's Centre. And I'm going to read, it's a bit shorter than that, yours, but I'm going to read it. We, the undersigned, petition the Council to keep our Burfield Children's Centre for the good of the whole community, because so many people benefit from it. It's used by Citizens Advice Bureau, anti- and postnatal groups, speech and language appointments, stay and learn sessions, parenting advice, toy library, baby clinics, health visitors, back to work for parents. Travellers come in and we work with them in the outreach for both the travellers and the surrounding areas, and I'm delighted to present this.
Thank you, Councillor Locke, and that petition will be fed into the 24th of March meeting. Councillor Macro.
This is a petition to save Ethereal Library from closure. It has 374 signatures, and it says, we, the undersigned, call upon West Berkshire Council to keep Ethereal Library open. Closure would discourage people from reading because of the difficulty and expense of getting to Newbury Library, particularly by public transport, prevent children attending library literacy sessions, and discourage them from reading, and cause extreme difficulty for those who rely on computers in libraries to access the housing list and universal benefit websites, and would greatly affect older people who rely on libraries for access to a variety of reading matter. And I would like to comment, Mr. Chairman, that as well as signing, many of the signatures are accompanied with comments, and I would like those to be taken into consideration as well, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Macro, and that again will be fed into the 24th of March discussions following the closure of the period of consultation. Thank you. Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to present a petition to save Thatcham Library from closure. The wording is the same as Councillor Macro, so for expediency, I won't read that out, but happy to present that for consideration. And again, with the comments, which are quite extensive, I'd like those to be considered.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dillon, and again, that will be presented on the 24th of March. Right, now on to item 6 on your agenda, which is public questions, and we have quite a number from 2 members of the public. And to ensure fairness, as we do, this is a time-limited session of 30 minutes. I am going to follow, after I've asked the first two, I'm going to take them alternatively. So, first of all, could I ask Gary Puffett, please, to ask question A in his name?
Thank you, Chair. Gary Puffett, West Berkshire Labour.
You just need to say, can I ask the question in my name?
Okay. Can I ask a question in my name, Chair? How does the council think the cuts will impact upon the wider local community?
You don't need to read it because we have it in front of us.
Okay, fine.
Thank you very much. And could I ask Councillor Law, please, to answer?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for putting your question, Mr. Puffett. Just in the interests of clarity and good communications, I assume you're the same Gary Puffett that's currently a councillor at Greenham Parish, and you were a Labour Party candidate at last year's general election for Aldershot, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I always like to know who I'm addressing. This is an economic question, Chairman. So it would be the change in our total budget figure between this year and last year that matters in regard to this question, rather than the actual figures for savings, which are themselves only part of the overall budget settlement. The change in the Council's total planned expenditures from last year to this is only £1.61 million. It was budgeted last year at £122.86 million, as against the current year's budget of, which we are proposing tonight, of £121.25 million. Now this is a very, very, very small amount when judged against the total local West Berkshire economy, which is a gross value added of circa £5.25 billion. Indeed, the reduction in the budget represents only 0.003% of 1% and will have no measurable impact on the local economy. Indeed, it's dwarfed some 4,000 to 5,000 fold by the expected 105 million to 157 million of additional contribution to the local economy next year from the continuation of a 2 to 3% increase in overall economic growth. Chairman, we live in one of the top 5 most prosperous areas of the country, and our local economy and those of surrounding areas is thriving and is therefore more than capable of taking this small budget reduction in its stride. Now, having said all of that, there will, however, be some non-economic impacts from aspects of our budget. But I see, Mr. Puffett, you and others are planning to ask these questions of my other colleagues in your following questions. So do you have a supplementary question on economics? Thank you.
Could you then please ask question B standing in your name, please, Mr. Buffett?
Yes, can I have an answer to question B, standing in my name, please?
Thank you again, Mr. Puffett. Thank you for your further question. Now, given the infinitesimal and almost immeasurable impact of a 1.6 million budget reduction on a 5.25 billion economy growing at 2 to 3% per annum, the answer to your question is no. Indeed, to do so would be a total waste of taxpayers' precious money, and I don't think you'd thank us for that, would you? Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Chair. An impact needs analysis assessment will give us an understanding of what the cuts will mean to the local economy, not just now, but in the future. So in that respect, how can that be a waste of taxpayers' money?
Chairman, it's basically because the small impact, as I pointed out, compared to the large impact that even 2% growth would that it brings the economy. I'm not sure how we could ever measure it.
Thank you. And now, could I ask David Marsh, please, to ask question G in his name? And Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Marsh. The vast majority of the expenditure plans of this council are firm and are not actually being subject to the consultation process. So I think it's our belief that that is right to take those issues to tonight and to resolve them. Phase 1 savings consultation has been analysed, and we will be using some of the transitional funding we've received in tonight in the budget. If I move on to phase 2, those particular findings will be considered at both an executive and a council on the 24th of this month, and we'll be looking at how further transitional funding can be used. Do you have a supplementary?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Puffett, please, could I ask you to present question C in your name?
Yes, could I present question C in my name, please?
Authority trading company, and we will come back to that at a later time. In addition, the capital debate that we're having later will have an amendment that I'm seconding to actively use capital budgets to generate income where it makes economic sense. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Mr. Marsh, would you please ask question H in your name? Sorry, that's Councillor Croft again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my apologies. My apologies, Chairman, you're quite right. I've been thrown by the reordering of the numbers. Thank you, Mr. Marsh. On behalf of Mr. Norman, right, the local government financial settlement was approved by Parliament 2 weeks ago, so there is no traction there to get additional funding from the local government financial settlement. And I would like at this point again to thank the 3 Conservative MPs in West Berkshire who got us the transitionary funding at after the local government financial settlement. I have spoken to all 3 of the MPs recently, and all of them will continue to lobby in at least 3 different ways. Particularly the Care Act. Last year this council was hit by a £3 million impact from additional burdens on the Care Act. We took a judicial review out against the government, which they decided to not proceed, and we're still waiting for a response from the Department of Health about the Care Act funding. That could be up to an additional £3 million. However, for the purposes of this budget, we have assumed that we will get no funding. The second area where MPs, particularly John Redwood, are working is on business rates, where particularly the valuation of business rates has hit us hard. The Valuation Office revalued the atomic weapons establishment last year, and I believe that cost us over £1 million out of our budget. So again, our MPs will be lobbying on that behalf. And on the whole question of business rates generally, I saw Alex Sharma yesterday. He's the MP for Reading West. He's also Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Right Honourable Oliver Letwin MP, who is the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is in overall charge of the Cabinet Office, and as such for large elements of the implementation of government policy. I pressed Alok again significantly to ask the government to hurry up the business rates issue. This council, and I don't want to preempt my colleague Councillor Jones, who will be talking more about it, hands over a very significant sum of money to central government. So all 3 of our MPs continue to work hard on behalf of West Berkshire residents. We'll see how successful they are. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. Sure. Could the council leader address the fairly widespread view that West Berkshire got quite a poor deal compared with some other authorities, including Wokingham, which you mentioned, Mr. Edwards' constituency, and also Oxfordshire.
And again, in view of that, are there any avenues at all that the government can be approached to say, we didn't get a fair deal? Can you look at this again?
Yeah, thank you. To answer your specific question, the local government financial settlement, you're quite right. We were actually hit, we were the third hardest hit unitary authority in England with a 44% cut in revenue support grant. Actually, Wokingham got a worse settlement than we did. We were third behind Wokingham, who got the hardest hit, and then Rutland, who was second. So I acknowledge entirely that the formula used was very detrimental to us, and I will be addressing that in the revenue budget speech later.
Mr Puffett, please. Question D, standing in your name.
Yeah, Gary Puffett, could I please have question D?
Thank you, Mr Puffett. Yes, we have been looking over a number of years at the provision of cafes within libraries, and will continue to consider the options for this, as we have provided one within the refurbished museum. Regards the energy provision and broadband, the energy provision for each library is sourced through the council's central energy contract. Likewise, the broadband provision is also part of the council's corporate system, both of which maximise the best deal through economies of scale. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr Chair. You say you're looking at this now. Why wasn't this looked at before the proposals for the cuts have been made?
As I said, Mr Puffett, we've been looking at this over a number of years. I was portfolio holder for cultural services in 2005, and we were looking at it. As you'll probably know, most of our libraries are fairly small buildings, and to try and put cafes in there will be a detriment to their main purpose.
Good. Could I ask Mr Marsh for question I into his name, please?
Mr Chairman, can I refer council to question I?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your question. The service is being reduced but not stopped. A library service will continue. We are currently consulting with the public on the proposal, and we will need to review and consider all the responses made before determining a final proposal for the service. And although local authorities have a duty to provide bus services under the 1985 Transport Act, the level of service is not prescribed. The Council's passenger transport strategy sets out our priorities for funding bus services, and we believe that the remaining supported bus networks will meet our statutory obligations. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr Chairman. With regard to libraries, would you agree that closing a mobile service at the same time as closing or proposing to close the libraries particularly in some of the more rural areas, doesn't really make any sense? Would it not make sense to expand the mobile service if there are to be a reduced service in some parts of the district, rather than to close that too?
Well, as I've already said, the current proposals are still out for consultation. The consultation will end on the 7th of March, and we will carefully consider all of the responses before we make our final recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Puffett, please. Question E.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr Puffett. This hasn't been decided yet and will be subject to the outcome of the public consultation and the final proposal for the library service. And each library building would need to be considered on its own particular circumstances. Do you have a supplementary?
Any consideration surely wouldn't include selling any land off or buildings off for a peppercorn rate, as was done for Parkway and the Newbury Gateway project.
I presume when you're referring to a peppercorn rate, that is if communities should come forward to with proposals to work with us to run a library service. I'm assuming that is what your question means.
No, the question meant, well, if you were selling the assets, is there an intention to sell the assets, rent the assets?
As I've said, we haven't decided yet. There are many options from the outcome of the consultation, and parishes and communities may wish to run their own library, and they may be able to lease the building from us, and buildings that are no longer required will be considered for an alternative use if one can be found, or the council may also consider selling or leasing premises to external organisations. But I have to stress the options will be considered, but we can't take a final decision until the outcome of the consultation and on the 7th of March.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Marsh, question J, please, in his name?
Yes, could I ask the council to look at question J, which was put forward in the name of Peter Norman? Thank you.
Councillor Croft, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Gosh, Mr. Marsh, and by extension, Mr. Norman, if you consider £2.8 million paltry, you have a different concept of the value of money to me. It's one of the great truths that some people, when receiving other people's money, in this case taxpayers' money, do not really appreciate the work that goes into creating the necessary wealth. But to answer your question, I've already announced an executive last week, but I can confirm again this evening that all of the transitional funding we have received will be used to help community organisations to develop new models of service delivery that are less dependent upon council funding. Last, at the executive, I announced £400,000 worth of transitional funding to help develop new service models in short breaks for disabled children, homelessness relief, empowering West Berkshire, and for adults with learning disability. More, the remaining £1 million of the transitional funding will be announced after the Phase 2 consultation is complete and we've been able to assimilate the comments that have been made in the consultation. Do you have a supplementary, please?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, the word paltry, you yourself said the transition relief and the funds that were available from the government were disappointingly small, and I think that's what Mr. Norman meant. I think, can I just ask, you're saying yes, is that the answer to the question?
Yes.
Mr. Puffett, please, your final question in your name.
Yes, please, Council. Could I have question F answered in my name, please?
Councillor Bowick, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Puffett. There are a number of options which will be subject to the outcome of the public consultation and therefore the amount of stock that becomes surplus. We will look to offer surplus younger age stock of books and other materials to other departments within the council, such as children's services and to schools. Some stock could be sold. There is a programme of disposal that, alongside a reduction in purchases, would also see the stock diminish. As far as furniture and fixings are concerned, we would look to retain the best for refit to any remaining branch libraries and elsewhere within the council where appropriate. It may be necessary to retain some items within the premises subject to the longer term decisions for the premises use, and we've already touched on that. These decisions cannot be made at this point, but all options for both surplus book stock and furniture and fixings will be considered. Do you have a supplementary?
Mr. Marsh, your question K, please. In the
Last one. My last one. Yes, thank you. Could I refer you to the question K from in the name of Peter Norman, please?
And Councillor Croft, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Marsh and Mr. Norman. Yes, you are correct. Councillors are very aware of their obligations to all of their constituents, not just the loud and noisy ones, but also the quiet ones who want nothing more than to go about their daily business. It's not for me to tell councillors how to conduct their business with their residents, but I know most councillors, myself included, are also parish and town councillors and close to their communities and working hard for their communities in that way. The last sentence in your question is a complete non sequitur, so I shall ignore it. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just to clarify that, I mean, I didn't write the question, but I assume he's referring to looking at practices and other local authorities do for suggestions of what works and what doesn't work, and use their ideas. But my supplementary question is just to say that given that 6 district councillors, including 4 Conservatives, attended the 2 public meetings organised last week by the group West Berkshire Save Our Services, would you agree that the suggestion by Councillor Frederickson and others that these public meetings were a very useful way to not just to hear what people were thinking, but also to actually get constructive suggestions for the way for the council to both save and make money in the future, are a good way forward?
Thank you, Mr. Listen to that. Oh, thank you, Councillor Joe. I would actually say that every way that councillors listen to their residents, public meetings, Twitter, physically shaking their hands, being at parish council meetings, every way in which councillors listen to their residents is a good way of listening to them and appreciating their comments and views.
Thank you, Mr. Buffett and Mr. Marsh, for those questions. Now, can we move on to item 7 on the agenda, membership of committees?
Mr. Chairman, just to announce that we have changes to the Western Area Planning Committee. Councillor Anthony Stansfield has been replaced by Councillor Adrian Edwards. Councillor James Cole is now a substitute on this committee. And in relation to Licensing Committee, Councillor Adrian Edwards has been replaced by Councillor Clive Hooker.
Thank you. Items 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 I am taking on block, merely to note that some committees have not met. Councillor Webster, please. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to provide an update to members further to the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There was reference raised at that meeting to an issue in terms of logging a request for scrutiny. I can confirm in my role as chairman I asked that to be investigated and can confirm that there is no issues with the system in terms of logging scrutiny through, and no fault logs have been recorded. So would urge anyone who wants us to consider something to log on and let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Right, 13 on your agenda, we have 3 motions as yet to discuss. So please could I ask Councillor Macro to move the motion submitted in his name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members may remember just under a year ago, when the new council came into being, there was a report that recommended that councillors' basic allowances should be increased by a significant percentage, and that was voted through. What I'm asking now is that, in the light of the all the cuts to services that are being proposed, all the sacrifices that residents are being asked to make, that councillors should also make a small sacrifice, reverse the award last year, and also not take the 1% that they could be given this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd second that and reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon.
Any other people want to speak?
Now, did you wish to say anything more at the moment, Councillor Macrona? No. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Frederickson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I speak, may I ask the monitoring officer for comment on the motion, as I believe half the motion is already detailed in tonight's budget.
Mr. Chairman, I can confirm that item 1, which relates to the index linking of members' allowances, is already included in the budget papers as a saving proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to come back to that point if I would, but first I'd like to just briefly talk about the supposed 16% allowance increase that Councillor Macro alludes to. First of all, this particular element was a recommendation of an independent remuneration panel. This is completely separate from the council and recommended this change, and detailed that would be a cost of 43,000, not the 54 that Councillor Macro has detailed. I urge him to look at the particular report and find the exact quote should he wish to question that. The element that is particularly concerning and missing in Councillor Macro's comments is that prior to the last election, councillors' pension rights, IT allowances were both removed and significantly reduced the long-term cost of councillors to the council. However, as these changes were made, it was obvious that an independent review of allowances would consider this, and it is following these changes that the panel advised of the allowance increase to ensure that our democratic process remains accessible even to the most marginalised. That is the very purpose of the panel. It is not political, it is there to say what an allowance should be to ensure that anyone in our community can become a councillor and engage in that process. And that entire process, looked together as a package, changed pension rights, IT allowances, broadband benefits, amalgamated them all so that it was in an overall long-term sense less cost to the council, but it did result in that increased front basic allowance. Now let's be frank. Removed pensions, reduced other allowances, and still receiving roughly £1,000 less than, say, for example, Labour councillors in Reading, doesn't make for the snazzy headline that Councillor Macro would like to have in the Newby Weekly News. I can understand that. I understand why Councillor Macro may have neglected to mention them. However, on that particular point, let's think about what Councillor Macro may have also neglected. As the monitoring officer has just mentioned, on page 189, line 6 of tonight's revenue budget, it clearly factors in not taking the 1% increase in councillors' allowances. So to be clear, that is already detailed in tonight's budget. What's more concerning is that the Leader of the Opposition is making proposals without checking to see what is actually in the budget in the first place.
Sloppy work.
He has neglected to check that the budget already details that element. He has neglected to offer an alternative budget tonight. He has chosen to use his leading motion to draw attention to 0.02% of the savings being discussed tonight. I am left feeling that whilst Councillor Macro has been busy spinning his allowance supposedly increasing headline, he has neglected any sense of perspective. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you, Councillor Frederickson. I fully support and endorse your views. I'd also like to inform members of here and members of the public that the Conservative manifesto upon which we were all elected last May by the residents of West Berkshire included a commitment to ask the Boundary Commission for a review of ward boundaries, but also for a review of the number of councillors. I do assure you that the number, whatever decision the Boundary Commission makes on the number of ward of councillors, it will not be more than we have today. I cannot usurp their authority and tell you what it will be, but they will do what they decide to do. Councillor Jones and I are meeting the Boundary Commission later this month and will progress the review of ward boundaries and the review of the number of councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Councillor Metcalfe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Macro would know, that I have actually got a degree of sympathy with his motion tonight, simply because it does seem to pull out the wrong perception that we're being greedy maybe, and that we're taking money where the public are being asked to have a reduction. But may I point out that we don't actually have to take it. None of us members here actually are obliged to take this money. And more to the point, how about taking it, Alan, and giving? You could be the first person to give £1,000 to the Field Trust Library. How about it? It's a good way of putting money back into the public domain. So I'm afraid I won't be supporting your motion tonight.
Thank you. And Councillor Webster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't intending to speak on this item, but Tim actually raised something that's very pertinent. After the discussions last time round, I actually looked at this from my own personal perspective and decided that actually I thought there were 6 groups within my local area and local community that could benefit from it. So I took this decision on a personal basis to donate that additional increase to groups within my local area. So I looked at it from a tax purpose in terms of giving it back, and it became a logistical nightmare that I spent more than an hour and a half on the phone to HMRC on, and never wish to repeat that again. So I thought, actually, why not turn around and look at groups within my community? So as a result of that, just under £1,000, a children's playgroup has benefited. Someone who's actually competing on behalf of Great Britain has got funding for training facilities for young people within the community. Money's gone to the air ambulance, which we all know do a wonderful service. So what I say is, members, that the money is within your gift to do something with, and if you aren't happy with the amount that you've been given and you can't find a way of giving it back, spend it within your local community in the way that I've just done.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Anybody else wish to speak? In that case, Councillor Dillon, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We welcome the fact that number 1 with the index-linked increase is now within the budget. Councillor Frederickson probably well knows that this motion was submitted before the budget was available. So the cheap political stab at it not being read beforehand is just completely out of order, Councillor. When this allowance was agreed by the independent panel, we were in different times. I'm sure we will hear later tonight, and we've heard in the press how we are now in different economic times, that we have a 44% reduction in revenue budget. What we are proposing is a sensible way to try to put some more money back into the revenue budget, something that this council has been appalling at doing over the last 9 years in terms of protecting income and generating income. Councillor Webster talks about giving to local charities within your locality. That's all well and good, but again, that doesn't affect the revenue budget of this council, which is what this motion is trying to achieve. Collectively, by foregoing this, we can do more good than we can invest in it in small pockets or supporting local charities. So, Mr. Chairman, this isn't snazzy. This was a genuine attempt to get some cross-party support as individual councillors, so we could say to our residents that we actually are all in this together, that we take the proposal seriously, and that we as councillors will do what we can to mitigate the losses to our communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Councillor Macro, please, sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great for Emma Webster to contribute to her charities, or perhaps for me to try and help get a library trust going in the field. But if we were to all to forego this increase, we could save the lollipop ladies. There's several other savings proposals in this budget around about that figure that we could save. We could save the empty homes officer. We could actually do something substantial with it. It's not a great deal of money, but we could do something substantial with it. So, again, as Councillor Dillon said, we're all in it together. Let's show we're all in it together, and let's sacrifice this small amount of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Thank you, Councillor Law. Yeah. Now, I need to put this motion to the vote, please. All those in favour of this motion, please show. Thank you. And those against?
It's lost.
Then I'm afraid your motion is lost, Councillor Macro. To motion B on your agenda, and ask and Councillor Chadley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move this motion. I was elected only 10 months ago to represent the members of my ward, Birch Copse, and here I find myself facing a budget that will implement reductions in the services West Berkshire can offer, not only to those in my ward, but to each and every individual in West Berkshire. I look back, and like most people, I heard George Osborne discuss the budget deficit. I, like you, heard talk of living beyond our means and needing to balance the books. It is a hard fact to be given. The finances of our country were in a shocking mess, and bringing things back in order is no easy task. We, as Conservatives, seem to always have to put right the mess caused by others. It is a thankless task, but one that needs doing, and one we can do. It is a task that we have been implementing already, and over the last few years this council has tightened its belt and looked at efficiency savings. But tonight we will be discussing the reality of a balanced budget, and all of us here, residents, staff and councillors, will all feel the impact of these proposals. I ultimately accept that by making these savings we can protect the vital frontline services that we offer to our most vulnerable residents. I think that the executive and everyone involved here at West Berkshire have been faced with some extremely tough choices, an unenviable task, and they should be recognised for ensuring the most vulnerable feel the impact least. With that said, the impact of some of these savings could have been mitigated if we had been given the opportunity to introduce these savings over a longer time frame. Just over 3 months ago, we were looking at how to implement savings of just over £10 million, which in itself would have had some unpopular choices. Then we get the bombshell, and unfortunately that's exactly what it was, a bombshell of an additional £9 million. That meant we were given 2 months to provide a balanced budget, something that we are legally obliged to do, whilst implementing savings of nearly £19 million, which is roughly 1/5 of our entire budget. Hard decisions have been arrived at, priorities rightly given to areas like frontline child protection services, but other areas have suffered, with limited time to come up with alternatives, and that, to me, is the biggest shame of this budget. Making changes are necessary, and unfortunately painful, but central government, and in particular the Department for Communities and Local Government, are giving us all here tonight the problem of making these savings with little time to manage how they are implemented. We will do our best. All those involved at West Berkshire and our local MPs have been campaigning publicly and behind the scenes to reduce the impact, and fortunately they have gained some success. We now have a transitional support grant which will be used in crucial areas to soften the blow. We will continue to work with our MPs and other authorities to change this hand that we have been dealt, and we will reach out to our communities and seek solutions. But the budget tonight can only be made based on the facts we currently have. I do think, though, that a message needs to be given back to the Department for Communities and Local Government, and I think the phrase "too little and too late" comes to mind. But any extra funding will never be too little, and we will take whatever extra can be identified, no matter how late it comes. Mr. Chairman, members, I say we must do our bit, but did they do ours? Did they do theirs?
Thank you, Councillor Chadley. Does that find a seconder, please?
Yes, Chairman, and I reserve my rights.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, could I just remind members to make sure that if you speak, you do have your microphone switched on. This is for the purposes, of course, as this meeting is being webcast. Thank you. Now, I have a number of people wishing to speak on this item, and I shall take them in order. Councillor Bale, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me this opportunity to speak this evening, and I'm very pleased to support this motion. I know that the leader and colleagues have been in regular contact with our MPs, which has resulted in the offer of some transitional funding. But I think the government needs to understand the way that all our residents will be affected as a result of the significant reduction in our funding. I would also like to commend the executive and officers for the time and effort they have committed in order to prepare the budget we're considering this evening. But none of us like the extent of the savings proposals, and I want to point out the cumulative impact that these savings would have on Pangbourne, and hope that these examples can be used in discussions with government. The proposed savings which affect Pangbourne will affect the young, the elderly, the vulnerable and the vitality of the village. Pangbourne is defined as a rural service centre in the West Berkshire Council core strategy, and that definition could no longer be applied to the village if all the proposals are implemented. The young will use the Children's Centre and Pangbourne Library, a place where they grow in learning and inquiry, as well as participating in groups such as story time or rhyme time. And a significant number of children participate in and enjoy the holiday reading challenges. Those children who attend Pangbourne Primary School will lose the school crossing patrol, putting more pressure on their parents to accompany them across the road. The elderly will lose the library, resulting in social isolation. Reading provides them with mental stimulation, and going to the library provides a reason to leave their homes and engage with others. The elderly and less mobile will be further affected by the potential loss of the 143 bus service, which enables them to visit friends and facilities not available in the village. These are people who cannot walk the distance to the railway station and perhaps could not cope with the stairs, which are the only exit from the return platform. The elderly will also be affected by the withdrawal of funding for the neighbourhood wardens, because the wardens, in addition to their formal duties, are extremely caring and support events for the elderly and host a Christmas party for them. The vulnerable young families will lose the facilities of the Children's Centre and the access to the internet terminals in the library. How will the vulnerable be able to apply for benefits, etc., without internet access? The village economy will be affected, as shoppers from other villages use the bus service to get to Pangbourne. What bus service in future? And those who drive will be put off by the non-availability of the library and the increase in parking charges. And I do know that work is ongoing to try to provide a limited bus service, and that will be much appreciated if it can be achieved. But my main plea regards the library. Residents and the parish council are willing to be involved in providing more assistance. For example, more use of volunteers, increased use of the facilities, and possibly some funding. But this can't be achieved before the budget savings would be implemented. So I'm asking the executive to consider using some of the transition funding to allow the library to remain open for as long as possible, and ideally for at least 6 months, as that would provide time to progress discussions about the longer-term future of library provision. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to a successful outcome from the continued lobbying of government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bales. Councillor Linden, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not the best position that we see ourselves in, and I'm really, really disappointed that the government, I feel, have let us down. We expected a 25% cut in our grant, and we would have accepted that. You know, we have to make further savings in government spending, but we were then hit at such a short notice, and I just feel that that also affects cuts further, which will affect the most vulnerable in our society. But we do need a legal budget, and I will be voting for this budget. And I'd like to thank our 3 local MPs for their hard work in trying to deal with this problem. Locally, we're going to see, depending on the consultation and how much we can use transitional relief, problems with the mobile libraries, the remaining libraries, the wardens, and also our local council offices in the east. This transitional relief is only a temporary relief. We're only getting it for 2 years. We also face further cuts in the March budget, according to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to meet our budgetary needs. So we could face further cuts on that. I think the government has also got to look at other areas in central government so we don't get penalised more. The growing cost of the revenue costs of PFIs, which were dealt with by irresponsible Labour government, which we're still responsible for. We also, I suspect, in total government spending may not be as efficient and may not be cost effective as smaller local governments are dealing with smaller budgets, and I think the government needs to look at that. We're faced with the alternative of a very hard left Labour leadership. That is not an excuse for us not to make sure that we do the efforts at central government level so we can provide proper local government funding. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgman, please.
Chairman, thank you. I rise to support this motion and very much hope that further funding becomes available. Indeed, to pick up on one of the questions that was asked earlier and answered by Councillor Croft, and to anticipate the next motion, if we could only keep the money our residents pay us in council taxes and the money our businesses pay us in business rates, we wouldn't be having these issues. There are a number of savings that affect the Mortimer ward that I would wish to be revisited, not least, and I pick up on what what Councillor Bell just said about Pangbourne, the proposed closure of Mortimer Library. But given the time available, I wish to speak about the proposal to remove the Mortimer to Willingcombe to School bus provision from those who do not actually qualify on individual grounds. This proposal went to consultation on the basis that it was discretionary spending, whereas in my view, and in the view of many others, it's nothing of the sort. It should be seen as mandatory spending. Now, it gives me no pleasure in saying that, because I can think of many other ways to spend the money, and I really want to emphasise this, I want children to walk or cycle to school. Indeed, the Mortimer to Link Save Our Buses campaign emphasised that. They stated in an email to executive members prior to the meeting on the 11th of February, and I quote, "We would strongly prefer to have an available route, rather than a bus service, for people to be able to cycle or walk between the two villages." Now, there was a massive response to this specific proposal in the Phase 1 consultation. So far as I'm aware, more people responded to this question than to any other. Certainly more than the number who responded to the entire proposals in Phase 1 regarding children's centres or the libraries. The critical issue is this. Is this route available within the meaning of the legislation? If it isn't, the council has to provide transport. The proposal before you says yes, it's available. The community and the two members for Mortimer and the two members for Burfield say no, it isn't. And it isn't as if we haven't been here before. In 2006, Malcolm Berry of the council replied to a question from Stratfield Mortimer Parish Council to say that, following consideration of the route, members of West Berkshire Council had taken a decision to identify the route as unsafe. And we're now expecting 233 students plus their parents to use that self-same route. I could go on with specific arguments about individual elements of the route to show it's not, in the words of the legislation, available, and indeed Save Our Buses produced 88 pages to counter the council's position. However, given the time available, I simply say that the officers have got this one wrong and the proposal needs to be revisited. What the residents want is a proper walking and cycling route between Mortimer and Burfield that will remove all argument and save considerable sums in the long run. That is what we should be promoting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. I'm going to go slightly out of order so that we can get some other views in. Could Councillor Macro, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They seem to have strayed somewhat into the revenue debate, but never mind. But there is one additional thing I think perhaps we should be lobbying government on, and that's £3 million as a result of extra cost to this council for the care fund. Here we are trying to set a budget. We've been denied this money for several years past, and now we still don't know whether it's coming in or not. I mean, this is a nonsense, and this is meaning that this council is having to make budget decisions now, pushing things onto parish councils who have not been able to budget for them as well. It's a nonsense. So let's put that in the lobbying very strongly, please. And also, could we remind government ministers that we do have a timetable for setting a budget, and that when decisions are made by them, we need time to assimilate it before we can reflect it in our own plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Councillor Jacks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you're no doubt aware, I'm currently West Berkshire's representative at the Trustee Board of the Citizens Advice Bureau, a post held for many years by former councillor, now our Alderman, Andrew Rolls. Most councillors I know will be in receipt of a letter recently sent by the Bureau's Chairman of Trustees outlining the important work carried out by the Bureau, which gives professional advice, free at source, to the most vulnerable members of our community. With the cuts that we're experiencing for future use, this is going to be a much higher demand service. I fully appreciate any great difficulties in balancing the budget, but I do hope that some way can be found to further reduce council funding to this worthwhile organisation. Trustees have sought ways to maintain services and will continue to do so, but outreach branches, such as in my own ward, Thatcham, will certainly be under threat. Reduced funding will mean shorter hours of opening, and I believe this will only cause great pressure on the council at the end of the day, when people cannot get the answers and support that they need, how to receive benefits and advice in many sources. So for this reason, I support the motion that this council will continue to lobby central government for further funding to alleviate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jans. Councillor Clifford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to support the proposal that the Council continues to lobby the Government for a fair deal for West Berkshire. It's our job, it's what our residents expect, and we owe it to them. In time, we'll be able to lobby them in the context of a more mature relationship with central government, one where localism is the watchword, and where we have a new funding model where we're no longer dependent on handouts from central government, but have more independence and a renewed focus on the health of our local economy, as we'll hear when we move on to the next motion. This will be good for West Berkshire, and it can't come soon enough. But that said, there are limits to the calls we can make on taxpayers and council taxpayers. It seems almost hypothetical when we're standing in this room discussing these important issues, but we should remember that we have an enormous national debt, which is growing, I find hard to say, and a continued deficit. We can't spend with impunity. But we have in this budget, and we have, because of the transitionary funding, protect statutory services. We've prioritised carefully, and recognising government can't meet all our needs, we're developing new ways of working. I think we all know that it's been a very difficult and very painful process, and I think we're very glad that our leaders and MPs were able to make a strong and powerful case to government for transitionary funding. It's this work that we'd like to see continued and see the lobbying continue for fair funding. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. Councillor Locke, please.
Thank you, Chairman. How refreshing it was to hear a balanced and well thought out motion. It wasn't tub thumping and point scoring. It was from the heart. Councillor Bale, you resonate completely with the village of Mortimer with your comments. These villages need to come together. They need a centre. They need to be a community. And as you said, libraries are the heart. They're the heart of a village. They bring together everybody. My other colleague from Mortimer strayed into the budget ones. Yes, I know I deeply and have been concerned since about 2006 with the walk to school. I too believe in walking to school if it is appropriate, not just available. And I have got figures, which this is not the time and place to give to you, how long and how much it will take to get a pathway through a wood and a bridleway suitable, appropriate for not just children, but their accompanying parents with the buggies and everything else. The one thing I would ask is, if these cuts, and I know that some of them have to go ahead, but please give us a time so that we can put in place things that time to get other ways to fund them maybe, that we can get people to help. And I would ask that perhaps 6 months would help find people to help run our libraries, to help parents find their ways. And as I have on petitions that are going round for both the library and the walk to school, please give us time to work out solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Locke. Councillor Metcalfe, please.
Chairman, thank you. Again, I fully understand Councillor Macrow's original comment. I think the reason we're all standing up here now is we're putting down markers of where we're going to be fighting our battles later this month to secure services within our villages and our own areas. Purley-on-Thames is quite a large ward, it's quite an extensive ward. We cover the entirety of 3 parishes and have a large chunk of another parish. But we haven't actually got many facilities, not West Berkshire Council's facilities, within the whole ward. Wonderful schools, we have a very good refuse collection, and I have to say, our roads aren't that bad either. But the majority of our facilities, we actually rely on Pangbourne. Pangbourne is our service centre. This council recognises Pangbourne as our service centre. So I will actually be supporting Councillor Bell in all she tries to do to secure our service centre. Certainly with a view to the libraries, surely we must have at least 6 months to transfer, to work out a new plan, a new Brexit, if that's what you like to call it. I think there's all sorts of other things that we've got to do, and we've got to look at. But we mustn't rush this. We must do it carefully and sensitively. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Podger, please.
Super. Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to strongly support this motion. I do not believe that this and many other councils have received anything close to a fair deal in terms of local authority funding. I do understand the necessity of eliminating the deficit, and the associated costs of not doing so. And as Paul points out, this is not a burden that we want to pass on to our children. Similarly, I have huge support for the executive and understand that they have limited areas where cuts can be made. But these huge cuts to council funding impact massively on our residents, the silent, law-abiding, tax-paying majority. And that's just wrong. Of course, Paul and I are most concerned ourselves with Hungerford, and in that we echo the comments of Councillor Bale. We're also a rural services centre. My particular concern is for the proposed changes to the Children's Centre, which is a hub. Suzanne Taylor and her team do the most excellent work there, and I think that changes really are short-termism because it generates real cost savings in the medium and long term. Its holistic approach to not just children but whole family support really does benefit the community. We are equally concerned about our library and bus services. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pask, please.
Chairman, thank you. May I start by also paying tribute to our leader, the executive, and indeed our officers for an incredible amount of hard work under a very difficult circumstances. When we all stood for election a mere 10 months ago, we all expected for there to be budget reductions to local authorities. I don't think anybody expected a 44% reduction in 1 year. So I support this motion in that it does say at the end that we continue to lobby government for a fair settlement in future. And without treading on Councillor Jones's toes in the next motion, clearly the way forward on that is for us to keep a proportionate and reasonable amount of the business rates that we, as in an affluent area, raise. But one of the issues that, despite thanking them, I would also urge our executive to consider It's the rate, as others have so eloquently said, of change. And whilst Bucklebury doesn't have a library, it has the mobile library service, which I'm sure will feature very closely in the consultation, and which we will revisit on the 24th of March at the next council meeting. But equally, I resonate with my colleagues from Mortimer. The one issue that I feel has not been looked at as closely as perhaps it should is the big issue in Bucklebury, the withdrawal of a bus that was put in for pupils from Bucklebury to the Kennet School over 20 years ago because the route was dangerous. Now, what's changed? I'll tell you what's changed. There's even more traffic. There's probably twice as much traffic on the roads, and one has to access part of the roads in order to walk to school, even though it's less than 3 miles away. But the proposed routes are across ploughed fields, through woodland. I wouldn't let my children walk those routes, Chairman. I wouldn't let my wife, not being sexist, but I wouldn't let my wife walk those routes either. So until there is a safe route, and what price safety of our children, I would urge our executive, with the transitional funding, which I welcome and thank our MPs for achieving, even though it is transitional, it doesn't last forever, but we have a wonderful, like we all do, a wonderful community who are willing to rally around, but they need time to rally around and to sort out our own proposals to achieve what we need for our children's safety. So I'm making a plea, if possible, a little bit of transitional relief for Bucklebury and Mortimer and a few other places, in order for our residents to get their act together to help us achieve what we need to achieve, and that is the safety of our children. Chairman, I hope this motion, well, I know this motion will almost certainly succeed. I hope we are successful in lobbying government for a fair settlement. I don't care about a total lack of government grant as long as we get adequate and proper and reasonable funding from the monies that we are able to source ourselves. And I thank very much Councillor Chadley for bringing this motion to Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Cole, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing I'm about to say should be taken as any criticism of our executive or indeed of our MPs who've done a wonderful job. We have enormous cuts forced down upon us from on high. A timetable that, to me, is simply irresponsible. The result is that this council cannot have the amount of money that we believe we need to do the job we should be doing. Even the resulting budget will in fact be risky. There's nothing left in there if something goes wrong. Our reserves are already on the low side. The villages I represent in Kimpbury Ward have all the same issues. We're outlying villages. We don't have a library, but we are interested in Hungerford Library. We don't want to see Hungerford Library close. We don't want to see the buses cut, or the Citizens Advice Bureau, or indeed the neighbourhood wardens. We want the potholes to be fixed. Here we are, we're going to cut the spend on the roads, and what's going to happen? Well, a little bit down the line, the potholes will grow, and then the claims against the council will grow, and very suddenly there'll be less money to spend on services. It's a circular thing. And we're not being allowed the time. We're not being allowed the time, even with the amount of transitional funding that we have. So, I have to ask, why is this? I'm well aware that some of my colleagues are not so keen that I should ask this question. To me, you have to ask why this is happening. To me, I look at the top of the tree, the top of the money tree, I find someone called George. Now, in a time of
austerity, George has his own priorities. George's priorities appear to start with the likes of HS2. Their figures, 43 billion for a half hour off the journey to Birmingham. A trip that most of us would actually work through anyway. 43 billion, I wonder what that'll actually turn out to be. 50 billion maybe? Who knows? Another example, bought-in consultancy. The National Audit Office, their website reports, annual spend is now increasing once more. I took that off the website last night, so I guess it must be true. The overseas aid, I'll refrain from calling it what I like to call it, but it goes on upwards. The European Union, no, better not talk about that, let's keep it clean. You see, George, our priorities differ. Those are your priorities. Our priorities are what we've been talking about in here this evening. I don't blame you, George, personally, for the sheer stupidity of the speed with which these cuts are being forced on us. That's somebody else's fault, I'm sure. But what you're encouraging is divisive and irresponsible.
1 minute, Councillor Cole, please.
Now, George, I hear tell that you have ideas about being the next Conservative leader. I have to tell you, George, you won't get my vote. It's 1st of March. 1st of March would have been my father's birthday. Why do I mention him? He's the picture up there, top row, far left. He'd have found central government's priorities and enforced timescales insane. So do I. And I ask you please to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I got my timing wrong then. Follow that. I look around this chamber and I think there's two members I can... So, thank you. I look around the chamber, I see that there's two members who've been here longer than myself, Councillor Pask and Councillor Locke. And I have to say, and I'm sure they feel exactly the same. No, you weren't here when I arrived, Councillor Linden. But I'm sure they feel the same as me. I've never been in such a difficult meeting where we're going to be making such difficult decisions. Looking at some of the issues that have come up during this debate, and I did one of the questions I asked before tonight was of the Chief Finance Officer about what percentage of our expenditure is mandatory and what is discretionary. In actual fact, it's a very difficult question to frame and to get a definite answer. What we eventually came up with, without wishing to spend a fortune trying to work that particular issue out, is the vast majority of our expenditure is mandatory. We can't reduce it, and particularly I'm here thinking of areas like in children and adult services. So that vast majority is mandatory, which means that bit which has that element of discretion has got will get appallingly badly hit. There is no two ways about that. Picking up on a couple of the issues that have been raised, and Councillor Macro, you mentioned the Care Act, and I think it's implicit within this motion that we are lobbying the government as hard as we can on that particular issue. And clearly we've not been afraid to take the government on that issue. I think it is very unusual for a Conservative authority to go to judicial review against albeit at one time, I'm not sure it started under I think it did start under a coalition government, but continues under Conservative government. But one thing we are doing there is I have had an opportunity to raise this with the Minister, and we are hoping for, Richard Bennion is working to ensure that we have another meeting with the Minister, and that has been promised. And hopefully we can get a resolution, a positive resolution to this, but that is certainly out of our hands. Turning to Councillor Locke, the speed of which these decisions are being made, and this is one of the awful things about tonight. Until just before Christmas, we did not realise this financial tsunami was going to hit us in the way it did. But rest assured, I think on this side, and speaking for Councillor Croft and the other Conservative members, that's what we want to use this transition for, to ensure that this is about transitioning services, and because what we don't want to do is lose those services. But there is no two ways about it. We have to make decisions about reducing funding and finding other ways to continue to provide those services. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Now I have one more speaker and then I'm going to go to summing up. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I represent the Wash Common area, and the Wash Common Library has been open since 2005, and it serves not just Wash Common, but it also serves those from Enbourne, North Hampshire, and a number of smaller parishes. It's not just a book lending service, it's also a community service, as the preschool users has a story time there, and it's just a few yards away from the flats for the elderly in Hanover Mead. It's open 4 days a week, has computer terminals used by families and youngsters in the area, and despite being only 3 miles away from the Newbury Library, the local bus service is threatened with a 50% cut, which will make it very difficult for residents to have a proper library service. It's a vital community facility which should be continued, and if it's subject to no funding, I'm sure that we can get volunteers to staff this very important facility. And I await further information from the library service on how we might do this. Another vital service is the school crossing patrol in Valley Road. Having lived in the area since 1977, I know how dangerous Valley Road is, and in the past I've urged Highways Department to install a pedestrian-controlled crossing, but this was refused. However, the Education Department agreed to fund a school crossing patrol, and the particular crossing patrol, who happens to be a gentleman, not a lady, does a great job in ensuring the safety of children and of their parents when they need to cross the road. With the redundancy of this post in the offing, I'll be contacting John Rankin School, which it serves, to see whether they would be prepared to undertake a partnership with West Berkshire Council to re-employ the present school crossing patrol in the same way that another West Berkshire school does. I'm also prepared to offer the school 6 months of my own funding in the hope that this will go some way in persuading the school to fund the crossing patrol. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I do deplore the savage 44% cut in our revenue budget, and at such short notice. I wonder how the Secretary of State's wife would react if he announced one day that from next month he would be cutting the housekeeping fund, and that would be reduced by 44% as a cost-cutting measure. Now, if he spoke this in the kitchen, where the kitchen knives happen to be, she might be tempted to make cuts of her own. Chairman, I fully support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Arder-Walter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I do wish, as several previous speakers have done, to commend both the executive and the officers for preparing what must have been a very unpleasant and difficult budget. Given that we have a legal obligation to pass it is with a heavy heart that I will be voting to support said budget. And again, as I believe all of us have expressed tonight, I deeply regret the lack of time and provision to adjust to the scale of these cuts, which has been handed down to us from central government. I hope this is due to cock-up rather than conspiracy, but however it originated, it is deeply, deeply unwelcome. My heart goes out to many of the groups and communities throughout West Berkshire, of whom we've heard tonight, of which we're all aware, who will be personally affected by these reductions. So again, I fully endorse the comments that other councillors made across the board here, and in particular Councillor Chadley's motion, which I trust we will all be supporting. Just to extend a little beyond it, though, as a finishing comment, and to touch on a couple of comments from other councillors, I do hope that we, as both district and, in most cases, town and parish councillors, will use the coming weeks and months to mitigate the effects of these reductions together with our communities. So again, I commend this motion to the House. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chadley, please, to sum up.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for clarification of some of the matters that were raised during the motion, and good luck with your efforts with the later motion. I know you're working hard on getting additional funding. I'd also like to thank my fellow members. I welcome their support for this motion, and I think some valid points have been raised and hopefully will be put forward to the relevant people and will assist in any lobbying made. I do think we've made a stand here tonight, and I trust that this message is put through to our 3 local MPs and everyone else in authority that's relevant. Thank you. Commend this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Chadley. I'll now put this motion to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Thank you. I think that is unanimous. So we now move on to our final motion, and I would ask Councillor Jones, please, to submit.
Thank you, Chairman. Now that we are on first name terms, I thought I would preface what I'm about to say with a quote from George. I am embarking on the biggest transfer of power to our local government in living memory. We are going to allow local government to keep the rates they collect. That's right. All 26 billion of business rates will be kept by councils instead of being sent to Whitehall. That's what George said. So, get that on. I think the funding of local government has long been opaque. And with that opaqueness comes a lack of accountability. It has always been easy to talk about cuts being the result of other movements of money elsewhere, and I think that returning money and a steady income stream to local government that local government can control has some huge benefits for that accountability. We're far from the only local authority in this particular quandary, and I've looked up where our neighbouring authority, Reading, is. They actually collect, just for information, they collect 107.3 million in business rates, but they get they retain 29.3 million. So, on one hand, they are somewhat better off than us, but on the other, they still, a vast majority of their business rates goes back to the government. Currently, they receive 16.8 million in RSG, somewhat double what we do, but again, probably, and I'm sure if you're asking councillors from Reading, they would say that is not enough to continue to run their services. But we do need to improve competitiveness and remove that opacity that is currently there. Unfortunately, within those the words of the quote I said earlier, we won't actually be getting. It looks like being no resolution to this particular issue until 2020 at the earliest. And as we've just heard, and we've all been discussing, We have awful choices now. Does that 84 million, all that 84 million that we currently collect in West Berkshire, come back to West Berkshire? Or does it go to local government? The two are not exactly the same. And we need answers to that particular question. Are we going to get extra responsibilities or costs transferred onto us? You could speculate that we might well have, out of that 84 million, be responsible for a lot more of the schools funding than we are at the moment. As yet, we've no idea. West Berkshire is one of the engines of the UK economy. We are one of the places to be. We're part of the Thames Valley, very much something that drives the rest of the country. And we need to invest in infrastructure. We have huge pressure on housing, but we need more. We need that funding and that control of that local funding to be part of that continued success. I hope all members will be able to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Does that find a seconder, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you wish to speak now, or? Thank you very much. Could I ask Councillor Law then?
Thank you, Chairman. I totally support this motion. As Councillor Jones has already pointed out, the problem with the current system is it actually discriminates against southern and rural local authorities to the benefit of a northern or an urban local authority. He pointed out the contrast between Reading, which is very urban, with ourselves, which is very rural. So two very similar sized local authorities in the south of the country, but one is rural, one's urban. And you can see that the system as we have at the moment really doesn't work. I already mentioned earlier in an answer to a public question that we live in one of the top 5 most prosperous local authorities in the country. Whilst the country as a whole back in 2010 had about 2 years of recession, we in West Berkshire actually never had a recession. Yeah. Now a recession, for those who think, oh cracky, what is a recession? A recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. We never had even 1 quarter of negative growth. And starting in about the end of 2010, we, along with Wokingham and another somewhere in North Surrey, which I can't remember where, we were the 3 who started to increase our growth rate and started to, if you like, we were the engine that started to pull the country out of recession. We're extremely fortunate where we live. However, whilst our local economy continues to grow and thrive, that means we actually collect more national business rates. But as pointed out, we don't keep it. Give us our fair share, and we can put it back in to the infrastructure that is needed, the housing that is needed, and that's a virtuous circle. Therefore, I totally support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Linden, please.
Thanks, Chairman. The Local Government Chronicle this week has that 15 councils who will not be getting the revenue support grant and will be losing it fairly rapidly. And that also includes our neighbouring Wokingham Borough Council, will get negative grant. From 2019, we were going to get it a bit earlier than that, as was Wokingham. My concern is that means that we will get less and less money. I expect that most of our business rate will still be distributed to councils with greater deprivation. But what I'm really against is that we're going to get a negative rate, that we're going to lose even more of our business rates. It might mean that government doesn't keep it and gives it out to all councils, which is what I believe. So I think the government needs to look again at this redistribution to making sure that none of these 15 councils who will eventually get no rate support grant will not have to pay extra negative amounts of grant, which means we lose more public money. because that is a very Kaftanistic view, and that is the view I want to push forward, Chairman, and support those with this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Linden. Councillor Chopping, please.
Programme that we had, which the government has destroyed, which brought us in over £4 million a year, and replaced it with their heavily bureaucratic civil system, along also with the planning fees issue, which I beg your pardon, been going on about for some time. So I'm pleased to see this proposal that by the Chancellor that local authorities should receive the business rates that they collect. After all, and I'm going to use the word considerable several times, Chairman, we have a considerable business activity in our district which puts considerable demands on our infrastructure. And we have a considerable infrastructure to look after. After all, as a district council, we are half of the county of Berkshire. So in infrastructure terms, it is a great deal to deal with. But I was considerably pleased when I learned about this offer. Whoopee, we're going to get the business rate, says the Chancellor. Will that really appear, I wonder? But when you think about it, the business rates that we collect at the moment, excuse me, the business rates we collect at the moment, £84 million, more or less equivalent to what we collect in council tax. And it will be equivalent to 2/3 of our net budget. So it will be a considerable improvement on our financial affairs. But it will be with a considerable surprise, Mr. Chairman, that we actually receive what the Chancellor, I believe, what the Chancellor has stated boldly. I should imagine there will be lots of small print attached. But if it does materialise, I think we should receive it with considerable pleasure, because it will undoubtedly transform our finances for the benefit of our district as a whole. So I support the motion, which is encouraging you, Chairman. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chopping. Councillor Macro, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all this kind of talk of George and so on, I'm wondering if I've strayed into somewhere different. It doesn't quite sound like a Conservative-run council any longer. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember when what was then called the rate support grant was introduced. And in those days, councils, they had domestic rates, business rates, they collected it, and they spent it. This rate support grant was introduced because councils started having difficulty doing everything they needed to do based on that. And so they given a grant by government. Then, of course, we had the poll tax, and as a result of that, the tax we have now. And at that time, the government took the business rates away. Now, they were being told they're going to take the revenue support grant, which replaced the old rate support grant, away, and somehow we're going to have to somehow manage to do all these things we have to do by law with just the council tax. And as we've heard, but they may even start taking some of that away from us. It's ridiculous, and we really need to lobby hard to make sure that George comes through on what he said, and it's not just to local government, that it does actually come to the councils who need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Councillor Zverko, would you like to start your summing up, please?
Thank you. I too, as Councillor Chobber, was very pleased that the Chancellor announced this piece of legislation, but I'm extremely suspicious that it'll actually happen. We mustn't be complacent during the time of decision, and I urge the Chairman on behalf of the authority to lobby the relevant ministers in regard to ensuring that the rates that are raised in West Berkshire will be returned, and this will be considered for implementation within the lifetime of the Parliament. Naturally, any monies coming to the authority from the business rates will be more than welcome, and we will be able to put it to very, very good use. I support the motion to return the business rates to local government. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sverko. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. A few responses to the debate we've just heard. Firstly, to allay Councillor Linden and Councillor Macro's concerns about negative business rates. The government has said that scenario won't happen. So I think we can I think we can be certain we're not going to get into that situation. I'm a northerner by birth, and you know, one of the great movements of cash in local government has been from the south to the north, and I recognise we do need to, as a nation, we do need to be supporting the less economically active areas in the north of the country, and there are all sorts of very positive reasons for us to want to do that. That said, we are talking about 84 billion collected in this authority. Million, sorry. That's inflation for you. And if we are going to have local accountability, and if we are going to reward success, not discriminate against it, we need far better control over the money that is raised in this local authority. I hope that this motion will be unanimously passed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll now put this to the vote. All those in favour of this motion, please show.
Unanimous.
I believe that is unanimous again. Thank you. Moving on to item 14 of the agenda, investment and borrowing strategy. Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is a technical report, and it's required as part of the revenue budget that we put together a report which sets out the framework within which the Treasury Management Team will conduct the Council's investments and borrowings for coming financial year. It recommends prudential limits for investments in 2016-2017 and also sets borrowing limits for the next 3 years. The Treasury Management Team is a cross-party team, including Councillor Dillon, and in the interests of the substantive items still to come in the rest of the agenda, I'm not going to speak any more to it other than to ask Council to support this technical thing so that we can invest and borrow our money prudently but intelligently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Chadley.
Thank you, Chairman. I second this item and I reserve my rights.
Thank you. Would anybody like to speak? Sorry, Councillor Dillon.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that on this side that we support this strategy. As I said at Executive, we welcome the addition of an extra 12 months borrowing capability for this council, which will hopefully bring in much needed revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Anyone else wish to speak? In which case I shall come back to Councillor Chadley. No? Well, Councillor Croft, to sum up, please.
Again, I commend this report. It's an important report so that we can both borrow and lend money as appropriate as our cash flows come in and out, and I ask Council to support the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Can I now put this to the vote, please? All those in favour, please show.
That's carried.
That's carried. That's unanimous again. Thank you. So item 15 on your agenda, the Capital Strategy and Programme 2016-17 to 2020-21. Again, Councillor Croft, please.
Again, thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the draft capital strategy and programme for the 5-year period coming up. Although we face a very difficult revenue budget, the Council, West Berkshire Council and many of its partners will continue to invest in the future of West Berkshire Council, of West Berkshire. This capital programme lays out the plan for how that investment will happen, and it includes £57 million. I'll repeat that, £57 million for new school places and improvements to school buildings. It includes £55 million for maintenance and improvement of highways. It continues with 1.5 million to facilitate the delivery of superfast broadband across the whole of West Berkshire, an important personal and business investment. This capital strategy also helps to protect and support those who need it by investing nearly £12 million for occupational health equipment, home adaptations and supported livings for older people and people with physical and sensory and learning disabilities. That money will also go towards capital improvements to look after children. And finally, this capital strategy allows us to maintain a high quality of life in our communities. £3.8 million is outlined in here for the maintenance and improvements of parks, open spaces, sporting and cultural facilities. I ask for the support of Council for this capital strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that find a seconder, please? Yes, Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to second this motion and reserve my right.
Thank you. Could I ask, is it Councillor Dillon or Councillor Macro who's going to respond to this? Councillor Dillon, please, yes.
So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this strategy finds favour with us on this side as well. However, I would, Councillor Croft mentioned that it provides new school places. But I note within the detail of the report, it talks about the funding from government not being enough for the build costs within West Berkshire and doesn't include the cost for purchasing land as well. I think it's £1,100 per metre squared. So referring back to Councillor Chadley's earlier motion in terms of lobbying the government, again, that's something that we should be lobbying the government on to make sure that we are getting the right amount of funding to be able to build school places in West Berkshire, not just some national formula. However, more than happy to support and vote in favour of the capital strategy programme, Mr. Chairman. However, I would like to make an amendment to the report. Would you like me to table that now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, Chairman, I'm pleased to second the amendment that Councillor Dillon is placing before Council.
Please carry on, Councillor Dillon. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the leader for agreeing to second it. The amendment looks to insert an extra aim into our overall objectives, and that's to actively use the capital budget to help generate income that can support the revenue budget of the council through longer term investments. I think that the initial projects that Councillor Croft outlined are what we would see in a traditional capital investment strategy. But we need more than that now. We need to be able to use our capital funding to be able to generate longer term income revenue sources for this council. And I think by having an aim up front at the beginning of the document will hopefully focus councillors' and officers' minds so that we can then generate some additional revenue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Would anybody like to speak on this amendment? On the amendment? No? In that case, Councillor Croft,
Yes, I'm very pleased to support the amendment. The capital strategy programme has always allowed us the ability to invest for income where appropriate, but I'm very pleased to support this amendment because it allows us to bring focus back on that as an opportunity for developing revenue. Obviously, we'll be acutely aware of returns on investment and so forth, but I'm very pleased to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. I will now put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Carried. Thank you. I think that is carried. And we now move on to the substantive motion. Does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Simpson.
I'd just like to comment on the highways portion of that capital spend. It's £55 million planned for the next 5 years, approximately 40% of the total of the council's budget. And it's worth examining the composition. 41% is being spent on maintaining the highway assets from unnecessary early intervention, whether it be patching, surface dressing, highway maintenance or bridge works. 26% is being spent on improving the A339, adding new accesses such as to Sandalford and the LRIE. And 16% is being spent on road safety and LED lighting which in the revenue budget you'll see is contributing to mitigating our expenses. 15% is being spent on various flood schemes. Now, our highway network is large, as Councillor Chopping has mentioned, it's 50% of the total counties. The A339 is our most important arterial highway, and road safety and lighting is very, very important. And we lie in a large floodplain, so I commend that balance of expenditure as it reflects these necessary priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Macro, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a small point, but quite an important one. On page 59, section 4.5.5, we're told that the government thinks we've spent enough on new schools, and that in future, because we're going to need to provide more spaces, we're going to have to find nearly £8 million of capital to provide school places. And again, it seems the government seems to be trying to get us every which way. You know, first of all, they cut our revenue support grant, then they're asking us to spend capital. Now, capital's not free, of course. We have to either raise it or borrow it, and therefore have to pay interest. So I think it's very regrettable that the government is penalising us for trying to provide school places for our own children. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Anybody else? Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, amidst all the gloom and doom of this evening, I'd just like to bring a positive note. I was, as most of you remember, for the last 3 years, I was the portfolio member of finance, and during that time, I always mentioned the fact that we, apart from probably AWE, are the largest single investor in the district of West Berkshire. And if you look across the total, we regularly spend north of 30 million every year on investment going in to the West Berkshire economy. Just thank you. Thought that needed to be aired.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Anybody else wish to speak on this? In that case, could I ask Councillor Clifford, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Here we have some good news, and I think even Councillor Chopping might say it's more than a considerable package that's been put together, and I'm glad it's been welcomed by everyone here. Thank you. Please second the item.
Thank you. Councillor Croft, please, to sum up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, this capital strategy involves and identifies £140 million worth of capital investment in West Berkshire in the next 5 years. Council funding facilitates and matches money that comes in from other areas, such as central government, such as the local enterprise partner, such as developer contributions and other sources. So it's vital that West Berkshire Council makes a capital contribution, a very significant one. But I repeat the point, £140 million will be invested in West Berkshire by this council and the partners we work with during the next 5 years in capital. I recommend this motion and ask for council's approval, please.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Now, before I move to the vote, the monitoring officer needs to make an announcement.
Mr Chairman, just to draw Council's attention to the Local Authority Standing Orders England Amendment Regulations 2014, which came into effect on the 25th of February 2014. This piece of legislation effectively requires the Council to record the names of members voting for and against this proposal. Unless members have got any objections, I propose that we record the votes en bloc.
Does that find approval with everybody? Yeah. Thank you very much. In that case, thank you. I think that is carried. Which brings us on to item 16 of the agenda, the Revenue Budget 2015-16. Now, I'd just like to clarify the rules of debate for this item, which have been agreed by both group leaders. I would also like to point out that members will no doubt have been lobbied on the revenue proposals, and that is noted. A significant number of members are also parish or town councillors, and again, this is noted. So, could I first of all ask Councillor Croft to introduce the item, please.
Thank you. Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we put forward our most challenging budget ever. As we've debated already, and as we all know, West Berkshire Council's principal source of government funding will be cut by 44% next year, as the government continues to tackle the national budget deficit. This means that our council savings requirement increased to £18 million just before Christmas. In order to have a balanced budget, and we must have a balanced budget, we find ourselves having to make very difficult decisions with the knowledge that the council simply won't be able to continue to provide the same levels of service. We all of us have to think about different models for many of our services if they are to survive in the future. This will include supporting parish and town councils and other community organisations to take on some of the responsibility for delivering services if valued by local communities. There are some tough recommendations before us this evening. Members, I am sure that we will all agree that we did not become local councillors to see our local services reduced. Neither did we become councillors to put through a nearly 4% rise in council tax in 1 year. During the last few years, we have deliberately run down the council's reserves to the point they're now worth a little over 1 month's revenues. That could be a critical position if there was to be another emergency such as a flood. So our reserves really are as low as we can possibly allow them to go. Executive members and officers have worked hard to identify proposals in order that we are able to set a balanced budget tonight. I would like to thank them and the public of West Berkshire in responding to phase 1 and phase 2 of our public consultations. I would remind members of the public that the phase 2 consultation doesn't close until the 7th of March. And I've been monitoring these, and I've been touched and heartened by some of the responses which have recognised the very difficult position that the council finds itself in and the impact of some of these savings will have on residents' lives. My colleagues and I spent December and January lobbying ministers on their proposed cut to the revenue support grant. I wish to offer particular thanks to our 3 MPs for their support in lobbying the Minister of State. As a result of this, I'm pleased to announce that ministers listened to our concerns and we have secured a transition funding grant of 1.4 million for each of the next 2 years. Although in the context this is not a significant amount of money when compared to the 18 million we've had to find, it will enable this council to use this funding to help others to develop new models of delivery. It's important that I stress that the executive has agreed that all the transitionary funding will be used to help others to develop new models of delivery. We're not putting any of it away to either internal or to reserves. Members, the budget I put before you is in 3 strands. In the first thing, that better not be me. I'm sure I turned it off, I did. Members, the budget I put before you is in 3 strands. In the first instance, increases our revenue. In order to reduce the impact on frontline savings, we are proposing raising council tax by 1.99%. In addition, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has acknowledged that councils with social care responsibility, such as West Berkshire, are affected by an increasingly ageing population. And we now have the ability to raise a 2% precept for adult social care responsibilities. This will mean an overall rise of 3.99% in council tax bills. I fully understand that increasing council tax impacts us all, but especially it impacts the low paid, the vulnerable and those on fixed incomes. However, faced with the level of savings required, this increase in council tax is unavoidable. We have also had to increase other fees and charges, such as car parking fees. In total, these increase in revenue proposals will generate approximately £5 million. The second strand of the budget is the internal efficiencies that the council continues to make while still meeting our statutory duties. Just over £5 million of savings have come from further internal efficiencies, and sadly over 100 council jobs will be lost in the next few months. We will also be sharing more services with other local authorities, looking at different models of delivery, working with our partners, including parish and town councils, and working with all communities and community organisations. The third strand of our budget forces us to consider changes to our frontline services. West Berkshire Council is a very diverse organisation responsible for essential services, including, as three examples, the care of elderly adults, road maintenance and children's safeguarding, a wide variety of things. All of these things have real impact on our residents. Most of our budget is dedicated to services we legally must offer, such as the previously identified adult social care. These are mandatory services, and as such, the savings requirement has to come out of our discretionary, non-legally required services. And that is why it's hit so hard in certain areas. Excuse me. There are no easy alternatives to what is being proposed tonight. Even the Liberal Democrat group across the chamber have not submitted an alternative budget. There is no alternative, to quote somebody else from a few years back. In summary, with this budget, £5 million will be generated from additional revenue, £5 million from internal efficiency savings, and nearly £8 million from frontline services. Parish councils have really stepped up to the plate and are offering practical support. For example, Newbury Town Council is working with partners to retain a CCTV service in Newbury. Pangbourne and Upper Basildon parish councils are working together to see if they can maintain their local bus service. These are the types of practical partnerships that will be integral in the future to holding on to services that we value. The transition grant, to which I referred earlier, will be used to help mitigate some of the effects of the savings we are having to make. I want to make it clear that the transition grant is for 2 years only, but all of it will be used to give important services time to change to a more sustainable way of providing those services. Before moving on to the details of the transition funding, I'd like to propose my first of two amendments which will see the Phase 2 public-facing savings proposals being determined by a special meeting of Council on the 24th of March, and not as recommended in the report of the Executive. The proposal now is that the Executive still meet on the 24th of March and make appropriate recommendations to Council on the use of the remaining transition funding. This amendment will be seconded by the leader of the Liberal Democrat group, and I hope this will be agreed without any debate. I'd also like at this point to give notice of my second amendment that has been circulated and proposes 4 service areas where the Executive recommend that some of the £1.4 million transition funding should be spent in the forthcoming year. In total, we are recommending that £395,000 in year 1 is made available to the services set out in the amendment. This will leave approximately £1 million which will be made available once we have considered the Phase 2 consultation responses. In relation to Phase 2, I will repeat, the consultation closes on 7th of March, so we will not make any comment about those public-facing services until the consultation closes. We will wait for all the responses to come in, and will then consider them all carefully before we make any decisions. I can confirm that so far we've had over 3,000 responses.
1 minute, please, Councillor Croft.
To the 16 public-facing savings proposals. It is clear that the most of concern to our residents are proposals relating to libraries, children's centres, theatres and public transport. We will need to think about what the public have said on each of these 16 proposals and look at the opportunities available for transition funding. Hard times, but West Berkshire remains a great place to live, learn, work and do business. We have record low levels of unemployment. very low levels of young people not in education, employment or training. And as showed earlier in our capital strategy, we'll continue to invest with the future. It's with a heavy heart that I ask you to accept these proposals put before you tonight in your agendas, including the supplied amendments mentioned in the speech. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that find a seconder, please? Councillor Jones, do you wish to speak now, or?
I'll withhold my mic, Chairman.
Thank you. So,
Yeah, deal with Amendment 1.
First now.
Yeah.
Or do I there?
Yeah, deal with Amendment 1.
Right, okay. So, first of all, if we can just deal with a couple of these amendments and then we can get back to it, Councillor Macro. So, we'll deal with Amendment 1 first. Would you like to remind us what that is, please, Councillor Croft?
Yes, thank you. This amendment is that the Executive make appropriate recommendations on the 24th of March to a special meeting of Council on the 24th of March to adjust the Council's budget plans should the responses to phase 2 of the public consultation require it so to do.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Anybody wish to speak on this amendment? No? No. In that case, can I put it, the motion to Council, please? All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. And now if we can come to Amendment 2, Councillor Croft, if you could just remind us.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Amendment 2 is that Recommendation 2 be approved and adopted, subject to Council agreeing to allocate transition funding as set out below to the Phase 1 public consultation areas of service. The short breaks for the children's service area, £170,000. Homelessness support and relief through Two Saints and Step by Steps, £100,000. Empowering West Berkshire, £25,000. And adult social care, learning disability clients, £100,000. I propose the motion, with the amendment, please, Chairman.
Does that find a seconder?
Just a second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Anyone wish to speak on this? Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment as tabled was similar to an amendment that we had previously tabled, and we actually had removed the short breaks for children funding because we'd seen it in this amendment. But that did find favour, and we think it's important that services such as the short breaks funding is kept. And then, whilst I have the floor, just some clarification. If my declaration prohibits me from voting on this item, it does. Good.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? No. In that case, Councillor Jones, do you wish to say anything?
No.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
I ask Council for approval of this amendment.
Could I then put it to Council, please? All those in favour, please show.
Just to be clear, this is for the amendment.
This is for the amendment. Yes. Right. Thank you. Right. Where are we? Right. Now, Councillor Macro, if you'd like to respond, please, to the substantive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's no doubt that this council has been put in a very difficult position by the severity and in particular by the timing of the latest cuts to the revenue support grant. However, we shouldn't really be surprised that we now have a Conservative government, no longer moderated by a Liberal Democrat, Liberal Democrats in the coalition. So now we've got what I call a vicious attack on local government. I don't think there's two ways of putting that. And this Conservative government is even cutting back on funding for schools, not just the capital, as I've mentioned, but also the money that goes directly to schools every year. And I'm sure if we still had a coalition government as we had before, that would never have happened. However, the administration has known for a long time that more cuts were coming. Therefore, should have put things in place to ameliorate the effects of those long since. We've been calling for a long time for budget actions that would have reduced costs without affecting services. For example, cooperating with other councils and other organisations to get better deals on procurement when we buy things and when we buy services. 5 councils in Kent did this. These are district councils, and they saved 11 million in 2 years without affecting services. Their district councils don't have responsibilities for social care and libraries and highways. So if we could cooperate with our neighbouring unitary authorities, I'm sure we could save a lot more. We could partnering with other local authorities on large contracts, such as highways maintenance. That contract was re-let a couple of years ago without any thought of this, yet many of our roads lead into and out of other districts, particularly Reading. There are some roads in the east of this district you can't get to except by going through Reading. So we have gritting lorries kind of going into Reading, coming out again, which I'm sure could be done much more efficiently if we could partner with them. Zero-based budgeting. We've been calling for this for years. The council should be looking at every budget line item and only keeping those in where they can be really, really justified. Shaw House cost us council over £150,000 last year. You're proposing to save £30,000 for that next year. You need to find a commercial partner to get more income into that house, or you need to find another way of managing it and funding it. The council should also be looking at sharing back office functions with neighbouring councils or charities, functions like HR, customer contact centre, etc. We should be thinking of sharing offices with other councils, like others have already done elsewhere. And maybe even sharing offices. I know that South Oxfordshire and Vale of Whitehorse are looking for one at the moment after someone burnt their existing one down. The council has been hurriedly arranging meetings with parish councils to see if they can take on services such as CCTV, the neighbourhood wardens and libraries, and help with funding bus services. Why leave it to now? But parishes have already set their budgets. We should have been talking to them over the past few years about trying to share these services and partner with them. And we should be partnering with them, not telling them fund it or lose it. George Osborne, we've heard this name before, haven't we? Some local Conservative councillors are saying we're all in it together. That should mean working together with parishes and partnering with them, not talking to them. There are more government cuts to come. The council needs to be much more proactive now. We should be starting conversations with parishes, other local councils, other organisations immediately after this budget has been set to prepare for cuts coming in future years. Finally, we've seen from various petitions presented today and online ones still live that libraries and other services are very valued by our residents. Almost 1,000 have signed the one to save hunger for the library. Nearly 2,400 have signed a general one to save our libraries in West Berkshire. Please listen to our residents and do everything you can to save these libraries and other services when it comes to considering use of that transitional funding. By the way, I do want to welcome that statement you made that all that transitional funding will be used to try and save services so that so we can, rather than putting money in reserves or whatever for future years. Also, if the government gives us funding towards the cost of the Care Fund, Care Act rather, I would like a commitment, I'd like a commitment that it will be used to reverse some of these cuts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Now,
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to move my amendment. There's an amendment that's been tabled, which I need to change. It's basically I've been advised today that we cannot make a proposal to delay implementation of the cuts to public transport because this was a phase 1 cut, but it's been subsumed into phase 2, and we shouldn't be making any recommendations on phase 2 today. So I'd like to propose the amendment as tabled with that change, and I would like to speak to that amendment, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
First, does that find a seconder, first of all, please?
Just happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon.
Okay.
Councillor Macri.
First of all, I'd like to reiterate that we support the use of that 170k transition grant to help maintain the so-called short breaks for children service, which actually covers a variety of services provided by charities, including respite care and services for autistic children, as we've heard it previously. These charities rely on volunteers, but need funding for employed staff to manage the services. So this council actually gets a lot of bang for its buck, basically, because you employ one person, you get work from several volunteers as well. The proposed cuts to school to home transport, I mean, many children will have to be either accompanied or driven to school. This will make life very difficult for families where both parents work or who do not have available a spare vehicle. We therefore propose to use 132.5k to delay the implementation of these cuts until the start of the new year. This will allow the significant works that are required to make these walking routes safe, and we've been given some quite long timescales of some of those. It will give parents time to change their family arrangements. Many will have to change working arrangements to give time for a parent to accompany or drive their children to and from school. Employers need notice for employees to change their start or finishing time, and some parents might even have to buy a vehicle or learn to drive. And also allow parents time to budget for the increase in the fares or find an alternative way to get their children to school. I was going to mention the public transport subsidies, but I will leave that now. And move on then to the school crossing patrols. Parents greatly value school crossing patrols, what we know as lollipop ladies or lollipop gentlemen, as someone said earlier. That makes parents feel much safer if a crossing patrol stops the traffic so that they and their children can safely cross the road. £21,000 or £19,000 in his budget papers, there was a difference between the budget papers and the consultation, is a very small amount. We could have saved more than twice that if we'd reversed that council allowance increase. And it's small compared to the total budget. Please give time for our residents to adjust to these draconian cuts by voting for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Councillor Dillon, do you wish to speak now, or? No. Does anybody else wish to speak on this amendment, please? Councillor Bowen.
Chairman, if we approve this budget this evening, then discretionary home to school transport provided to families across the district will be removed. And some families will be asked to pay more for seats on buses more than they presently do for seats on buses. Removal of some free bus routes prompted a large number of consultation responses, and a common theme was the safety of children if parents choose to send them to school on the available walking route. We've listened carefully to parents, and in recognition of this concern, Council has already made some changes to the Mortimer route, for example, to improve safety. We've also changed the route from Bucklebury to Kennet School to avoid some of the more difficult parts of it. We've also taken independent advice for a second opinion on our officer's assessment of the Mortimer to Willink route, and their original assessments were supported by the second opinion. Contrary to reports in the press, Thames Valley Police have not declared any of the routes in question to be unsafe. And to the point that was made earlier on about the 2005 assessment of the Mortar to Willink school by officers, officers assessed the route as being available. Council did not approve that decision. To help affected parents in deciding how they want their children to travel to school, I am pleased to tell Council, Chairman, that we will be offering those parents whose children use the Mortar to Willink School, Bucklebury to Kennet School, and Aldermaston Wharf to Aldermaston Primary School the chance to secure fair payer seats at the standard rate. And I should say to the question about affordability of fare seats, we do make it possible for parents to pay the price in 8 payments spread across the year. These changes mean that parents will have to take more responsibility for the safety of their children to and from school, and in doing so, I think it would not be reasonable for us to continue funding school crossing patrols when we're asking people using home to school transport to burden more of the cost. And to the point about the amendment in particular, you've heard from Councillor Croft about how we intend to use part of the transition grant. We're currently in consultation on phase 2 of our savings proposals, closing on the 7th of March, and these are substantial savings in phase 2. When we have to consider the response to phase 2, we will be better placed to consider whether the £233,000 that Councillor Macro is calling for should be used to delay the savings from home to school transport and the school crossing patrols. So I won't be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Councillor Cole, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to expand on what Councillor Bowick has said about school crossing patrols. We must remember that this is not a universal service, and only a few schools benefit from a school crossing patrol. And of these schools, some are unwilling to take the responsibility for paying for this, whereas other schools are looking at ways in which this service can continue. And this includes them looking for sponsorship. But I strongly feel that those schools who do enjoy and value this school crossing patrol service should pay for it and not expect other communities who don't have a school crossing patrol to subsidise it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can I thank Councillor Macro for amending the motion. If we'd had transport in that within that motion, we could have been fettling our discretion for further discussions later in the month. The choices are awful. I think we all accept that, and if we could, we would. But unfortunately, we can't do everything. I hear what is said about time, but time relates not just to these services; it relates to many others as well. If we spend now, we can't spend later. This is transitionary funding, and as has been said, we do plan on using it all on transitionary, working on transitionary areas. So if we spend now, we have less money later, potentially, to spend on libraries. Potentially we have less money to spend on transport. These things are also very important. For those reasons, and not because I don't want to support those issues, but for those reasons, I cannot support the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Locke, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to correct my leader. It's the academic, not the new year. There's a difference. And I keep saying, it's being repeated, available does not necessarily mean appropriate. I would ask Councillor Bowick if he would tell us the increase of fare for a fare-paying place, because I understand it's rather large. At the moment, it's £250 a year, which equates for £1.30 a day. I understand that it's going to be £640, which is a big jump. Also, that if there are siblings, there's going to be not any discount. The second thing, Councillor Bowick, is the independent advisor on the de-restricted Goring Lane said there must be signage. And lastly, I know this is all coming up next time, so please forgive me, but I still go on. The officer said that the earliest that the buses could be stopped would be the 18th of April. That is 3 days into the beginning of term. I've spoken to the rights of way officer, and she said the works concerned would take 55 working days, which would take us up to the middle of June. Could you please clarify if I've got something wrong, Councillor Bowick?
Thank you, Councillor Locke. Do you wish to clarify any of that, please, Councillor Bowick?
There's a litany of questions there, Chairman. I'll refer to the fair payer one. As in the consultation, the fair payer price standard rate will be £684 per annum.
Thank you. Councillor Law, please.
Thank you again, Chairman. To paraphrase one known recent saying, I agree with Alan. The Liberal Democrats have, as Councillor Macro said in his introduction, for years been calling for actions with regards to the Conservative presented budgets. Since I joined the Council in 2007, they've consistently called for us to use our reserves. Indeed, many of you remember 2 years ago, I calculated that had we taken all their budgetary suggestions since 2007, this council would have run out of money sometime in the middle of 2010. So I've got no more to say at all about Liberal Democrat budgetary competence. Like they didn't read the budget detail about members' allowance tonight, like they haven't been bothered to produce an alternative budget, they've lost all credibility in my eyes to make any such amendments or to criticise this administration. I can't support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Anybody else? Councillor Dillon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard earlier in the debate Councillor Jones saying that we can't spend the money now and then spend it again later. Yet we've had a Conservative amendment for £395,000 worth of transitional funding. So it seems that it's fine for the Conservatives to suggest what to do with transitional funding, but not for us. These are genuine attempts to transition services. What we are talking about is being able to put off bus route closures, homes to school transport, so that we can make safe crossing points. We are listing why we want to use transitional funding. Compared to the amendment that's just been passed, which is just pure cash figures and doesn't actually say how a service will transition at all. Ours is a clear amendment to try to make sure that we have time to be able to put in longer term services so that we can protect these particular groups of people. Councillor Law can do his maths on a theoretical basis as much as he likes. He knows that to talk about spending reserves over and over again, he knows is a cheap political ploy that may have worked. It's a good one. May have worked before, but is now a tired argument, like their policies.
Thank you. Councillor Macro, sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Councillor Cole says that many communities don't benefit from crossing patrols, and many communities don't have the busy roads that the crossing patrols help people cross. So that's not really a valid argument, I don't think. As far as schools funding, the patrols, schools also have their own budget problems, and the government has just made that worse by cutting back on the school support grant. Councillor Jones says, well, we shouldn't be putting this money in to save phase 1 services, we might need them for phase 2, which may indeed, is true to some extent, but the same is true of the Conservatives' own amendment. And as far as the Council Law is concerned, I think Councillor Dillon has covered the reserves. We start afresh every year, Councillor Law. We don't kind of accumulate it from a budget to budget.
And the penny has dropped.
And as far as the alternative budgets are concerned, while we've been in opposition, we've put up an alternative budget every year until last year. Usually, you shut us down before we'd finished the debate, so I'm not sure how valuable that was. When you were in opposition, you put in one alternative budget, so I think that we can dispose of that one. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to ask for a named vote, please.
Nothing before that.
Thank you, Councillor Macro. Councillor Croft, do you wish to?
I'll remind you.
come back on any of that? I'm told you have a right to.
I was under the impression I wasn't allowed to speak on the amendment, Chairman.
You are able to come back at this stage.
No, I mean, I essentially, we're back to the same issue that Councillor Jones has already talked about. We made a decision that we would allocate £400,000 of the 1.4 million transitionary funding to the items I've already explained. We deliberately kept £1 million back because we knew we had consultation responses. Now, should we have kept £700,000 back, or 800 or 900? We don't know until we see the consultation responses and fully understand the implications of the consultation responses. £1 million allows us to fully understand the consultation responses, make intelligent judgments about the rest of the transitionary funding. I'm sorry, this amendment is about Liberal Democrats wanting to spend the money twice. To spend this set of money and then complain when we have no money to spend in the second phase of our transitionary funding. Not willing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Can I just check, are we, before I go to the vote, whether we're happy with a block vote, or do you want a name vote? A name vote.
He's for,
right.
He needs three other people to support him.
I need 3 other people to support you for that.
Yes.
For a named vote. Is it?
That's fine, name vote.
Name vote? Fine, then please carry on.
Mr. Chairman, this is a vote in favour of the Liberal Democrat amendment, and if you could please answer very clearly so we can record it. Councillor Arda Walter, for or against, please?
Against.
Councillor Peter Argyle.
Against.
Councillor Pamela Bale. Councillor Dominic Berwick.
Against.
Councillor Graham Bridgman.
Against.
Councillor Paul Bryant.
Against.
Councillor Anthony Chadley.
Against.
Councillor Keith Chopping.
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Clifford.
Against.
Councillor Hilary Cole.
Against.
Councillor James Cole.
Against.
Councillor Roger Croft.
Against.
Councillor Lee Dillon. Can't vote. Indeed. Councillor Lynn Doherty.
Against.
Councillor Billy Drummond.
For.
Councillor Adrian Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Sheila Ellison.
Against.
Councillor Marcus Francis prevented from voting. Councillor James Fredrickson.
Against.
Chairman, point of order. Can I have an interruption, please? Point of order. If Councillor Dillon is not allowed to vote, how come he was able to vote on the call for a name vote?
That's not actually on the budget, Councillor Law, and voting for the budget. It's a procedural issue. It's not about the budget.
Please continue.
Councillor Dave Goff. Councillor Nick Goods can't vote on this issue. Councillor Manohar Gopal.
Against.
Councillor Paul Hewer.
Abstain.
Councillor Clive Hooker.
Against.
Councillor Carol Jackson-Durger.
Against.
Councillor Marigold Jacks.
Against.
Councillor Mike Johnston's out of the room. Councillor Rick Jones.
Against.
Councillor Alan Law.
Against.
Councillor Tony Linden.
Against.
Councillor Molly Locke.
For.
Councillor Alan Macro.
For.
Councillor Tim Metcalfe.
Abstain.
Councillor Ian Morin.
Against.
Councillor Graham Pask.
Abstain.
Councillor Anthony Pick.
Against.
Councillor James Podger.
Against.
Councillor Garth Simpson.
Against.
Councillor Richard Sumner.
Against.
Councillor Anthony Stansfeld.
Against.
Councillor Virginia von Selsing.
Against. Against.
Councillor Quinton Webb.
Against.
Councillor Emma Webster.
Against.
And Councillor Laszlo Sverko. And Sorry, apologies. Councillor Laszlo.
Again.
Apologies, I missed Councillor Graham Jones.
Thank you. Against.
That's lost.
Right. Then that amendment is lost, and we can now move back to the substantive debate. So, I know all our executive members wish to speak. Can I start off with Councillor Law, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I have an extreme degree of empathy for and share a lot of the frustration of the members here tonight, and in fact the members of the public here tonight, particularly for the positions with regards to the impact of this budget on vulnerable people, library cuts, possible library cuts, and especially reductions in rural bus services, which particularly affect my own particular ward. Many of these services seem to have been around forever. Now, as been really mentioned tonight, and I'm sure none of our colleagues here tonight, none of the members, came into politics to reduce these services. So what's happened? A number of my residents have asked me this question. You know, they say, we know times are tight, but surely we still have money for such basic services. Where has the money gone? Now, here at local council level, it's very easy, and some of us have done it tonight, to blame central government, blame George, blame Greg. But I won't do that because that's simply not the answer. Part of the answer is the last Labour government spent it all. Now let's remember, before you go, let's remember Liam. You remember Liam Byrne? Liam Byrne, the outgoing Labour Treasury Secretary's note, left to the incoming Treasury Secretary, said, "There's no money left." Sorry. But how right he was. Labour's, however, Labour's mismanagement is only part of the reason. Another and even more significant reason has been the trend in what I call the triple social whammy. Number one is the change in population demographics. The two, advances in medical technology and the cost of that technology. And thirdly, society's changing attitudes to risk and safeguarding. The change in population, the population is getting older, we all know that. There are now more non-working pensioners than ever before, and more need care. Medical advances are keeping us all alive longer, and at an ever-increasing expense for treatment. Look at the strains that dynamic is putting on the National Health Service. And we in local government have the same stresses and strains in social care for elderly and the vulnerable. Medical advances are also keeping more babies and children alive than ever before. But unfortunately, it's often at the expense of requiring full life care support for severely disabled children and young people. And finally, the third string, incidents of abuse are rising. Whether it's a baby P or a Rotherham, or closer to home, an Oxford situation. And society is demanding we do more to protect from such incidents. All this means more money being spent on prevention, on risk analysis and risk reduction. So let me finish by sharing some local figures to support what I've just said. We look back at the budgets. 15 years ago, this council spent 31% of our total budget on social care across all groups. Today, that figure has risen to 46%. So from just under a third of our budget to just under a half in 15 years. It's even worse in money terms. Over that period, we've gone from spending 21.9 million in 2001 to 56.3 million this year on social services. That's 1.5 times an increase. So that's the answer to the question, where has the money gone?
1 minute, Councillor Law,
Thank you.
please.
Just about to wrap up. It's against that background that I and my colleagues have had to make the difficult choices we're presenting here tonight. Anyway, do we want more baby Ps or more bus services? Do we care for our most vulnerable or keep all our libraries going as before? Chairman, we've made our decisions. I don't suppose that many of the public here tonight will agree with all of them, or even many of them. I don't expect them to agree with many of them. But I do trust that members of the public, I'm speaking to you directly, at least having listened to the debate and listened to what I've just said, at least understand the difficulties and the backdrop against we, your elected representatives, have to make the decision. Chairman, I've got to support this budget proposal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, please. Do you wish to speak?
Sorry, I thought it was Councillor.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Doherty, right. Yes.
As portfolio holder for children and young people, I am able to support the budget before you. I have a duty to protect children in need of our care and protection who are at risk of abuse and neglect. While I recognise there are many different levels of vulnerability, I must ensure we meet all of our statutory obligations and minimise the impact on this most vulnerable group. We have heard a lot about what we can no longer do, but this budget before you enables us to deliver in some key areas within my service. Our core frontline social care teams and the work that we are doing with regard to our Ofsted improvement plan has been protected. Our progress has been ensured to enable our journey to being good at safeguarding to continue. Our disabled children's team are continuing their transition work with families with regard to education, health and care plans. Our family resource team can continue their targeted work with families in need. We can offer support to our care leavers. We can offer support to children and young people at risk of substance misuse. We will continue the success of our Turnaround Families programme, and we still have the ability for innovation as demonstrated through our recent introduction of the Emotional Health Academy. The areas within my service that face reduction are those that are looking at prevention and early intervention. While I am a well-known supporter of early help and universal provision, I know that it is difficult to calculate the impact this form of support may bring and the risk of not having it there. This area of support is not the sole responsibility of the local authority. I am confident that by working more effectively with our partners and communities, some of this impact can be mitigated against. By taking the approach of doing less for people, but by working with our communities to enable them to offer this form of support from within. I'm delighted to see so many people here this evening, as this gives me hope that there are those willing to act in these difficult times. I did recently attend your Save the Services meeting, and I did feel the energy and willingness of our residents to look for solutions from within the community to enable some of the discretionary services to continue. I am pleased to hear and see that many children and young people have parents and carers willing to work to support them. The children we support within the Children and Family Services team do not always have vociferous parents to champion their needs. I have, however, been listening, and I have taken into consideration the views from the Phase 1 consultation. In particular, we recognise the value and importance that parents of children with disabilities place on having the short break service for disabled children. It was never our intention to stop short breaks for disabled children, but we do need to rationalise the current arrangements. In order to ensure we reach all, in all localities and at all levels of need, we will need to look for alternative solutions. We will work with those existing providers who have declared a willingness to continue their services, with or without our funding, and potentially new providers to ensure a fair and accessible service. While not all have been willing to accept these changes, we believe that in order to achieve statutory compliance and target those hardest to reach, that a different approach is needed to ensure the future sustainability of short breaks. I am delighted with this evening's amendment to the budget, confirming that transitionary funds are in place for that very purpose. I know this budget contains many difficult decisions. I am, however, able to recommend its acceptance as lead member for Children's Services, as it does meet my requirement for an effective, available and value for money children's service here within West Berkshire.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. Never in my wildest imaginings did I think I'd be standing here to present savings proposals such as these. The implementation of the Care Act means that many of the services delivered by adult social care are now statutory, and members will be aware that we've been let down by the Department of Health because we've not received £3 million in funding that we should have from the Care Act, and other colleagues have referred to that this evening. As a result, there are a range of savings proposed by the Adult Social Care Service, and the team is working on a transformation programme to deliver services in a different way, and this will generate savings of nearly £800,000. The first phase of savings proposals, which were consulted on at the end of last year, included a reduction in the care and support of learning disability clients and the decommissioning of support for the homeless, which is the Two Saints floating support service and step-by-step lodgings for young people. And I'm pleased that some transition grant funding, which was fought hard for by our MPs, has been awarded to these services. And this enables officers to work with these organisations to explore different ways to deliver these valuable services to the most vulnerable within our communities. Within culture and countryside, Phase 1 savings included the closure of the Visitor Information Centre and public conveniences in Newbury. And whilst we hope to work with the Newbury Bid and Town Council to retain these valued services, neither of these organisations felt able to commit to take these on. I am, however, pleased to say that the residents of Kintbury have come forward with proposals to take over the running of the Kintbury Jubilee Leisure Centre. And this is a good example of how a community, working together, can continue to deliver a service valued by its residents. And then, just before Christmas, we had the bombshell of the announcement of the 44% reduction in the revenue support grant. Since that time, officers have been working ceaselessly to find further savings to plug the gap and enable us to deliver a balanced budget. These additional savings are still being consulted on. None of the Phase 2 proposals are palatable, including, as they do, savings to the services our residents love and value the most. Libraries is the most radical example. Although we consulted on savings to the library service in Phase 1, in light of the reduction in revenue support grant, it was evident that further savings had to be made. And it gives me no pleasure to have to stand here tonight and saying that the proposal is to reduce our library service down to just one library, which will be situated in Newbury. Particularly as it was only 2 years ago that I stated we had no intention of closing any library, but circumstances have changed dramatically. And I do understand the strength of feeling these proposals are generating, which is evinced by the number of people here tonight and the number of emails I have received. And I feel I should make it quite clear that we are not heartless. We do realise the effect this will have on our residents, and these decisions have not been taken lightly. There's been a lot of heart and soul searching during the course of this process. Last night I met with representatives of town and parish councils who have a library building in their community to explore ways in which these communities can work with us to enable a library service to continue across the district. Our highly valued theatres, the Corn Exchange and Watermill, have also been included in the Phase 2 proposals. And again, I've met with the Arts Council and the two organisations to discuss ways in which this reduction in funding can be mitigated. Once the Phase 2 consultation has ended on the 7th of March, we'll carefully consider the responses before making recommendations to Council, and decisions will be taken at the Special Council meeting on the 24th of March. And finally, Chairman, I'd like to pay tribute to the officers who've worked with me to formulate these proposals. They've spent all their professional working life dedicating themselves to delivering the services they so passionately believe in. So if it's been difficult for me and upsetting for our communities, just for one moment, imagine what it is like for them. And I thank them for the selflessness with which they've approached these very difficult decisions. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. In highways, we've had to make substantial cuts in maintenance, transport operations. And unfortunately, we've had to increase our car parking charges across the district. Now, I'm sure I have unanimity in this room. No one likes car parking increases, car park pricing. Nevertheless, without the income from additional car parking tariffs, and without the power consumption savings that we have wisely captured with our LED light programme, we would be the poorer by nearly £1 million in our budget. And that money is essential for our outward-facing services that other execs have talked about tonight. So I commend, difficult as it is for some of the highways maintenance, in particular highways maintenance budget views we've had to take, I commend the overall posture of our budget and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Frederickson.
Thank you, Chairman. As some of you will know, I'm the newest member to the exec. And when I was first given the offer to stand on the executive, I thought, not the ideal time to get involved with local government to that extent. But I thought, we've got a decent idea of what's being asked of us. We had some sight of the savings that we would be expected to make, and I was happy to be part of those discussions and understand how we could make them. Then Christmas happened. I can remember being at work. I was in Paddington offices. I worked for Vodafone, and I got a call from Roger saying there's been a bit of a change, quite a substantial change. And we're going to have to pretty much radically overhaul some of the ideas that we had and assumptions we had about the money we would have in the future. Roll on 1 week later, and the whole exec are sat down discussing what they're going to do. And in that meeting, there were essentially 3 points that came out of it that, given the context, were in a sense are worth noting for this discussion here tonight. One, that we wouldn't accept that we would fight for transitionary funding. Two, whatever we got, we would consult on how it was used. Even if that meant we had to have a very limited time frame. We ended up with a 3-week phase 2 consultation. We wanted to do that. The other element was that whatever we got, all of that would go into the front line. None of that would go back into reserves. And there are 3 points where other authorities didn't make those decisions. Some of them may go into reserves for other authorities, but we're not going to do that. And that was something I particularly remember, and going forwards, I think, given the context, we should still be proud of making that decision on that particular day. This also takes me to the point on the wider consultation process that we've put in place. Councillor Jones makes a very good point in that the vast majority of what we do already is a statutory obligation. So when it gets to the point of writing the areas where you do have that discretionary spending, and it's an area for potential saving, they are few. Politics aside, it's no shock that Liberal Democrats can't put forward an alternative budget in that sense, because it's simply so limited in the areas where we do have that discretionary spending. And to just put politics aside for one moment, when we look at some of the points that Councillor Law was making about how our demographic is changing, our population is getting older, there are more and more demands on the statutory element of the services that we have, and you're trying to make savings. That compounds all of them. But as across the board we have said tonight, the real pain that we have experienced is becoming the timing where we have had to find alternatives and where we can make those potential savings to get to the point where we have a legal, balanced budget. It has to be considered tonight. The ramifications of not having that are so severe. It would be to the point where they can't be deferred. We would essentially be bankrupt. Our services that are discretionary would be cut back, and it's likely that another service or another authority would take responsibility for our statutory services and ultimately provide them at a more expensive rate. So there isn't an easy alternative in that sense. There is one particular point that came up in earlier debate that I would like to go back to, though. As part of my portfolio, I have the human resources function. And a particular comment from Councillor Macro was, has the budget really been reviewed line item by line item? Now, I work for Vodafone, and you will have seen that in the media at the moment there are massive redundancies going on in their corporate function. I won't go into it, but one area is being prioritised, others are, and others are getting more funding. So I've seen colleagues have discussions, be made redundant, their people's incomes. Now, that's bad enough, but can you imagine if you were an officer at an authority and they said, that might be happening to you, but at the same time, whilst that's going on, we've got this news and we want you to work on finding proposals so that other colleagues and your friends and the people that you've worked with for years and the services you've stood by may also have to be considered, and how painful that would be.
1 minute, please.
That is the process that our officers have had to go through. Now, some of our officers have worked here for years, and they have worked with us in doing this, and their professionalism, dedication and care that they have gone through when putting together these proposals at such breakneck speed that we have been forced to deal with is remarkable. And I would find it personally incredibly hard to do, just from my very limited experience in having to deal with redundancies in my own area of work. So in that sense, I can support this budget, Chairman, because I've seen the dedication and care of the officers who have had to painstakingly go through it, line by line, in their desperate attempt to try and mitigate the impact on the most vulnerable, but still get to a point where there's a balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bowick.
Talk about a specific area of my responsibility, children's centres. Our priority, Chairman, is to care for the most vulnerable in our communities, and many of our discretionary services are going to be removed altogether or reduced. This will allow us to continue helping the elderly and the disadvantaged and giving our children the best start possible in life. It also means that we will still be able to deliver the services that the law says we must, such as waste collection, planning and safe highways. Children's centres, as I said to you, Chairman, this is what I want to focus on briefly. Children's centres offer important and highly regarded services to young families. It's proposed that in future these services will be delivered in a different way. For the purposes of these services, the district will be divided into 3 family and wellbeing areas that will allow us to reduce the number of buildings used to deliver the services. We will build on our good practice to embed the services at the heart of communities by making better use of community buildings facilities such as schools, leisure centres and community centres. We have already consulted extensively on the children's centres proposals, face-to-face as well as online. Further proposals have been consulted in phase 2, and I would urge anyone affected to respond if they haven't already. This is another area where our officers have been working diligently and carefully to make sure these absolutely vital services continue to be delivered as effectively as before, but in a different way. So I'll certainly be supporting the budget, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Councillor Franks, do you wish?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to Councillor Fredrickson. I'm no longer the youngest member on the executive. I shall let that go. As has been mentioned, this has been a difficult budget process. The timescale budget process that won't be concluded until the 24th of March. The timescale has also been a challenge. None of the proposals in front of us have been taken lightly, and always councillors have borne in mind the balance between protecting the vulnerable and the services enjoyed by the wider population. I welcome the transitional funding allocated to the Phase 1 savings and look forward to the decisions for Phase 2. This transitional funding was achieved through the hard work and lobbying of our local MPs. I urge people to continue to take part in the Phase 2 consultation, and thank you to those that are here and also those that have already taken part in putting their views across. These challenging and tumescent times lead to innovative and community-led solutions. In previous years, this has led to community youth clubs, which better meet local need than the centrally provided council services. Within my own portfolio, this year, several communities, including Newbury and Hungerford, are in advanced planning to take over the CCTV service in their towns. And this innovative lead can be shown in delivering other community services. In regards to the proposed waste service savings, I have been in discussions with the lead councillor for RE3 in Bracknell to remove the ridiculous cross-border charging, which blight our residents who are just trying to do the right thing and dispose of their waste responsibly. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, I support this balanced budget in challenging times.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dillon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I'm not able to vote in tonight's debate, but if I was able to vote, then be in no doubt that I would be voting against these cuts to our frontline services that will damage our community and will hit our most vulnerable of residents the hardest. We've heard from councillors tonight that they didn't get into politics to shut services, and that we're here because of the government's decisions on grants, as if that absolves them of all of the issues. In fact, earlier on, I'm a Catholic, and earlier on in the debate with Councillor Chadley, it felt like a mass Holy Communion session where all Conservatives were absolving themselves of their sins by being able to talk down against George Osborne. But, Mr. Chairman, let us be frank, that it was a Conservative government that proposed the local government settlement. Our Conservative MP in Newbury voted in favour of that settlement, and it is this Conservative administration that is delivering cuts. The Conservatives are making ideological decisions to cut this hard and this fast. We don't have to do it. We talk about, Alan just said there, what's the alternatives? The alternative is we don't cut this hard and we don't cut this fast. We do it in a way that communities can respond. Part of our transitional amendment was to allow our own local communities to be able to respond in a more timely manner, and that's what the government should have done as well. You are Conservative members, you all voted, I'm pretty sure, for Richard Benyon, and Richard Benyon in the House only 2 weeks ago voted for the settlement that you're now criticising. The scale, Mr. Chairman, of the cuts, both actual and those in consultation, have hit home with the residents of West Berkshire. And I think in spite of the local government settlement, we should have been in a position to do better. For 9 years, this administration has put electoral gain at the heart of their financial decision-making, leaving no room for manoeuvre. We heard the leader say that the reserves are at their lowest. It has lacked innovation in remodelling services and by generating additional income, even though everybody has talked for years about the funding black hole to come. You only have to look at the Barnett formula to see that the long-term funding of local government needed to adapt, and this council has not tried to adapt. Now, there are councils up and down the land, Mr. Chairman, that have invested in property, have set up trading companies, and I welcome the admission from the leader earlier tonight that the council will look to do that. They've sold services to other councils, entered into long-term joint ventures that have stopped them having to cut frontline services, like we are being asked to do this evening. And this is because those councils They saw the challenges ahead and they decided to face them. Now, Mr. Chairman, after tonight's debate, I will be taking use of the online system for scrutiny, and will be asking the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to set up a task group looking at how we can generate income as a council. We need to work smarter. We need to fully examine options, like Councillor Bairstow commented at the Save Our Services debate in Wash Common about selling energy. We need to sell our expertise. The excellent work that officers done on the highways document that we adopted this evening, are services that we can sell to other councils with our expertise. We need to put all of this together. We should have started it a long time ago, Mr. Chairman, so that we were better protected for votes like tonight, but it's better to start now than never. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. Does anybody else wish to speak on the revenue budget? In that case, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I move on, can I just address some of the comments of Councillors Macro and Dillon? Been a lot of issues trotted out there: back office, work with other local authorities, zero-based budgeting. We just heard about income generation. You know what? We're doing all of those, and we have been doing them. We've been doing them for a considerable amount of time. You might say not enough. Look at the actual where local government is at the moment. Councils all over the country are facing up to these very similar problems. Are they all in that particular boat or not? I know of plenty. Well, there aren't plenty of Liberal Democrat councils, but we've quoted from in the past, and to trot out all these things but not actually present them, to say they're there, but you go and find them, isn't really up to it. If you've got an alternative, present it. Because if it exists, present it. Don't say it exists, but we don't know what it is. Anyway, having said that, up until that point, and where we went into a little bit of mythology, I was going to congratulate the council on the tone of tonight. I think for members who haven't been in a previous budget debate, it can get pure pantomime, and I think tonight we've shown the gravity of the situation and the sorts of issues we're facing has hit home. This is a very difficult meeting. I was leader for a large part of that period that Councillor Dillon was referring to. I take no pleasure, I take a great deal of pain in having to be passing a budget tonight which is going to dismantle some of the achievements we managed during that particular period. I take a great deal of pain in passing an increase in council tax, something which we generally were able to not to have to do. In May of last year, as has been said before, most of us didn't believe we'd be facing this particular scale of problem, and thank you very Roger for inviting me to become deputy leader just before it arrived. Mention has been made of the comments of Liam Byrne, and whether we believe the issue was the financial crisis that enveloped many countries is to blame, or whether we believe it is overspending to blame. That doesn't change the overall situation we're in. Boom and bust. The claim of Labour was a total illusion. We have faced unprecedented lobbying. People are concerned, as we are, about libraries, about bus services, children's centres, short breaks for the disabled. They all affect people, and they are all very important. We cannot fund them all. We have to use money on core services, and I think Councillor Law was very eloquently explained that shift more and more towards expenditure on adult services, and most of that expenditure is completely statutory. We do look at the impact we have on, and that creates a very big impact on a much smaller amount of areas. But I think one of the very important things about local government is everybody needs to have a stake. And if we're taking those services away from the broad mass of the population, those services like libraries and bus services, they feel disconnected with the local authority. And we've got to find some way of squaring that circle. Necessity, one of the phrases I remember from school learning, and I'm sure we all did, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think the sorts of budget issues we're facing have concentrated minds as never before. And yes, there do have to be some new ways of delivering services.
1 minute, please, Graham.
That might well be looking at the library service, the creation of trusts. And I welcome the opportunity to work with people on that. There is a real opportunity here to empower parish councils and town councils and actually make them relevant to those sorts of services that we can produce. Also, we've got a chance to empower members. You know, I'm looking forward. I'm not happy about the sorts of cuts we're having to make, but I am looking forward to be able to work with my local community in Lambourne to find some of the solutions to many of these great problems that we face. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the motion which may be moved without notice 4.9.12, section 5, which is that we extend the meeting beyond the 10 o'clock if required.
If required. Thank you. Does that find a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. Councillor, so did you have a point of order or information?
I think it's a point of order.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Dillon said something that was totally inaccurate. He said that our local MP
Thank you, Councillor Stansfield. Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First, members, I've been remiss. I have forgotten to remind everybody that this budget proposal tonight includes the fees and charges for 2016-17 that are set out in Appendix H and I. I apologise for that remissness and ask you to note it before you make a decision on the budget. This evening there's been much criticism of central government, some of it justified. But I would like to remind members that 10 months ago there were general and local elections and the British and West Berkshire people voted for a Conservative government to tackle this country's financial deficit and continuing borrowing. Progress was made during the coalition, but nowhere near fast enough. The British people last May recognised the work still to be done to reduce the £1,000 borrowing every single year that central government does per man, woman and child, and our children will ultimately have to pay that money back. In my case, it will be my grandchildren will have to pay it back, but we cannot continue to borrow. I don't like many things, and I'm very pleased with the tone of the debate tonight. Many of us do not like it, but let's not forget ourselves the macroeconomic, the scale of the challenges that we face tonight.
Macro and economic doesn't go together.
Well, that's true. You're quite right. Okay, right. The bigger. Anyway. Councillor Dillon says that if he could vote against this budget or against the frontline services, he would. But there is no alternative budget from the Liberal Democrats to replace the £8 million that Councillor Dillon says he would vote against. Where's that £8 million going to come from? That's what I'd like to know. Now, I agree entirely. Local government must change. Of course it must. West Berkshire Council, the town councils, the parish councils, they've got to change. And we've all got to change at a much faster rate. I acknowledge and accept that entirely. We will continue to lobby, following on from this council debate, we will of course continue to lobby government for better funding. We will continue to lobby very hard for business rates and to get our business rates that our businesses in this district create and get them spent on local government activities on what's happening locally. We will lobby very hard for that, and I've had discussions with all three of our Conservative MPs, all of whom agree that we have to lobby and work hard for that. We've had, I think, a very intelligent debate, and I'd like to thank all the members for the excellent debate we've had this evening. I think it really has been very, very good, and I thank all of you. But now we must get on with this council's work. We have to have a balanced budget. Let's get on with this council's work with our balanced budget. I ask members to support the revenue budget with the amendments as laid out in front of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Before we go to the vote on this, I again have to ask the monitoring officer to come in.
Mr. Chairman, just to remind members of the requirement to have a name vote in terms of voting for and against the budget. What I would suggest, if members are happy, that we take it en bloc. They are recorded in the minutes, so that it's reflected.
Right. In that case, we will come to the vote on this. All those in favour of the revenue budget, please show. Thank you. All those against? Thank you very much. In that case, the motion is passed. I think a note has been made. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Right, could we ask Councillors Beck and Johnston to come back into the room, please? Yes. Well, if they're not there, they're not, are they? If they are still there.
Well done. These are flip, aren't they?
They are.
Have you noticed it?
If we can now resume the meeting, please. We still have another 3 or 4 items to get through. So, item 17 on your agenda, the statutory pay policy. And could I ask Councillor Frederickson, please, to...
Thank you, Chairman. Section 38, the Localism Act 2011, obliges us to produce an annual statement that will be published on our website. This essentially has to detail 3 key pieces of information, this being the remuneration of its chief officers, the remuneration of its lowest paid employees, and then offer a reflection of the relationship between those two as a mean and medium salary, so that comparison can be drawn. I'm happy to present this report formally and look for the Council's support.
Thank you very much. Does that find a seconder, please?
I'd like to second that.
And would you like to speak now? Reserve your rights. Okay, okay. Would anybody like to speak on this item? No? Would you like to come back, Councillor Franks?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to support this paper and just make mention to the living wage mentioned within it, which is a very good Conservative proposal, giving a fair wage and passing the burden on to businesses rather than the state.
Thank you. Councillor Frederickson, sum up, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reiterate, it is a statutory obligation. We are obliged to do this, but obviously for the process and purpose that we have here, we ask that full council support this and the information that's conveyed within it, within Annex C. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now put this to the vote, please? All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you. Item 18 on the agenda, amendments to the Constitution. Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This report lays out the scheme of delegation. It basically lays out the delegated authority to various people, to various officers, and to officers, but also certain committees and so forth. It's basically a change to the Constitution in light of statutory in light of legislation and common practice. I think in practice there's not very much in here of debate, but nonetheless, I would like to move it, and I'll sit down because time is moving on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does that find a seconder, please?
Chairman, yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Does anyone wish to speak on this? No. Councillor Webb?
No, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Do you wish to say any more? Can I put it to the vote?
Yeah, I would be grateful for council's support of this amendment to the Constitution concerning the scheme of delegation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can all those in favour please show? Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. So moving swiftly on to item 19, West Berkshire Council timetable of meetings. Again, Councillor Croft, please.
Again, Chairman, thank you very much. The Council has historically agreed in advance a timetable of meetings, of its public meetings, for the full municipal year. Following the election of a new strong leader, it was agreed to delay this decision until now. All I can ask you now, this timetable, I believe that Councillor Macro will second it, but this timetable I would ask.
Thank you very much. Councillor Macro?
Yes, I will second this motion and I'll reserve my right.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? In that case, I'll come back to you.
I ask for council support for this timetable of public meetings.
Right, all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Again, that is carried. Item 20, there are no members' questions. So I thereby, at 5 to 10, I do believe, declare the meeting closed, and please have a safe journey home.
Members, please be upstanding.